and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Trish.
And this is our podcast. We talk about wrestling news and various topics from different promotions, primarily AEW, but also New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, and topics from around the wrestling world. Whatever we find interesting, and we hope you will too. We are a proud member of the Social Suplex Podcast Network, and you can find our content on our podcast feed, the Social Suplex Podcast feed, as well as on Twitter and YouTube. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and rate our podcast. We also encourage you to check out the Social Suplex newsletter, which is published monthly and available at socialsuplex.com and contains insane amounts of news from dozens of promotions across the world, as well as features and other writing that we hope you will enjoy. Today is Monday, February 16th, 2026, and Trish and I are going to kick things off today with the Brody King situation, which is in AEW, which has been taking up a lot of airtime, communication, discussion this week. For those of you who may not be aware, Brody King is an AEW wrestler, and he has been fairly vocal about being upset with the way that Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE in the United States, has been dealing with things politically, or I don't know, basically ripping people out of their homes and sending them to concentration camps. Let's not sugarcoat it. And so Brody has been pretty vocal about this, and he wore a T-shirt that said "Abolish ICE," I believe, when they were in
Grand Slam.
Grand Slam, Mexico. And it's something that he has sort of become known for. So on the February 5th, 2026 Dynamite, MJF had a title match with Brody King that ended up being a squash match. But in the 2 minutes, 10 seconds, brief period of time before the bell rang, the Las Vegas crowd loudly chanted "Fuck ICE" before the match started. And it was kind of interesting because the camera seemed to the moment sort of hung there. Bryce Remsburg later tweeted that he had waited to hit the signal for the bell to ring because he wanted people to hear it. It did seem like the video broadcast was kind of engaged in it. There was a cut to MJF's face, and it was a thing that essentially broke wrestling news containment. It became something that was talked about in mainstream news, and still continues to be. John Oliver's TV show, was it Last Week Tonight or whatever it's called, talked about it last night on their premiere episode, and it was something that got a lot of mainstream notice because it seemed as though, for once, it seemed to underline a lot of people's belief or wanted belief or desire to believe that what ICE has been doing and what the Trump administration has been doing is so horrible that it has effectively broken containment, and that your average person in the United States thinks it's so bad that they will chant "Fuck ICE" at a wrestling show. Now, if you pay attention to wrestling, you know that AEW audience tends to be a little bit younger and more liberal than other wrestling audiences, but let's face it, it's 2026, and I think the idea that people have of wrestling fans is that they tend to be right-wing and rather uneducated, and so the idea that wrestling fans, and at this point it's a mainstream thing, so people aren't thinking about AEW, WWE, being angry at ICE means that every fucking buddy is angry at ICE, right? You know, I think we could have a bigger conversation about what that means and whether that's true. So that happened on Wednesday the 5th of February. Not a lot occurred from that. I think, Trish, you'd agree with me from like a wrestling standpoint. Like, it didn't get any kind of, AEW didn't comment on it. It got some mentioned places. Obviously, it broke containment, but it was less of a big deal than it seemed in some ways this week, because Brody King was not on, despite the fact that Brody King and MJF had a title match on the Saturday, February 14th episode of Collision. Neither MJF nor Brody King appeared live on the February 11th Dynamite, which was the go-home show for that show, right? And so later that night, Dave Meltzer on Wrestling Observer Radio spoke about it and indicated there, and we'll have the quote and we'll discuss it sort of more in depth, that they had not done anything for this particular match to build it. They just had brief video packages. And Dave Meltzer indicated that he believed it was specifically because of the ICE thing. We have the quote and we'll get it. This got aggregated, basically. And it got aggregated badly because Dave Meltzer on radio is an almost impossible person to summarize. Trish, you have to agree with me. You and I have talked about this probably for the 2.5 years been doing this podcast. If you listen to Dave Meltzer regularly, you understand that when you have to try and figure out what he's saying, you can't just interpret the words in front of you. There's a tone. There's like I think during one show, not necessarily one of the February 11th show, but during one show, he referred to someone as like the big man doesn't like it. And it was unclear whether the big man was Tony Khan or David Zaslav or Trump or God, perhaps. Like, he doesn't, you're not... You don't know know who he means. And so it's really hard to aggregate. And so a lot of times what happens is someone will get up early in the morning on a Thursday, they'll type up what Dave said, they'll put it out as a tweet, and people will get it will get a lot of communication, and then you go back and actually listen to it, and it turns out it's in some ways different than what was meant. So Trish and I always encourage you to go back to the source and go to the source for the audio. And especially with Wrestling Observer Radio, especially with Dave Meltzer, aggregation is just not something that we think is good. But in this case, I think the way that it was phrased and the way he chose to put it out there was extremely awkward. And I transcribed this from the February 11th show, and I'm going to just read it through so you guys can get a sense of what was being spoken about here. So the show started out, this is in the recap section of the AEW Dynamite. And it started out with Brian Alvarez saying they didn't do jack shit for that MJF Brody King match this weekend. And Dave was interrupting him and going, you know why, don't you? Do you know why? And Brian said, well, if they're worried for Chance chanting for ice, you could have just done a better video package. Brian Alvarez really likes video packages. Dave said, well, the deal is that they didn't want the fans in the arena to be chanting that. And if Brody came out, there was that risk. And And Brian said, is he going to get himself iced from television? And Dave said, man. And Brian said, so to speak. And Dave said, well, he's going to be on Saturday night. And Brian said, I know, but if they think this is just not going to ever happen again, I got news for him. And this is what Dave said in response, and this kind of contains the piece that was aggregated on Thursday. Dave said, I don't know if it happens in Sydney. I don't know if it doesn't happen in Sydney. I mean, I don't know. Nobody knows. Yes. When he comes back, it will happen again. I don't know how they're going to handle it. Maybe they're hoping it goes away. This is, again, not a Tony call. This is from above. The deal is essentially that, you know what it is. Nobody wants to get on Trump's bad side. If it wasn't for that, nobody would care. It's just a chant. But unfortunately, they got a company that they're trying to sell and get regulatory approval from a guy who, is going to take that stuff personal, That's just how it is. So, yeah. No Brody King on the show when he absolutely, of course, Brody King and MJF should have had a segment on the show. But I really don't want to complain about that because they've had a lot of TV time and there was no, sure, you could take out that Garcia match. But even then, that had a purpose to building up the hair match. Everything had a purpose to building up Saturday night. Saturday night is essentially like a pay-per-view. Can you imagine on Saturday night going against the Olympics, against, the slam dunk contest, although the slam dunk contest is a little earlier, so it's not going against the whole show, but it's going against the beginning of the show. So it's and it's Valentine's Day as well. It's a tough night. It's a great television card. Tonight's card was great, but the card on Saturday is much better. But I'll tell you what, when this thing was over, it's like everything that he's got coming up between this LA pay-per-view where they haven't announced the matches, but you can see the different thing where they're going. We do know the Young Bucks and FTR. The company feels really strong. They got Kenny Omega and Swerve next weekend in Sacramento, which I thought would be a pay-per-view match, but it's going to be on TV.
Sometimes, right, I think we're so to say acclimatized to listening to war.
With Stockholm Syndrome.
We're so acclimatized to listen to war that sometimes you don't realise how batshit it is when it's all
That's why I said to you, I was like, I have to read this out loud. We can't just play the clip. This has to be I swear, again, it's possible there's a mistake or two in here. I did this transcription myself, so I take full responsibility if there's an error, but I promise you that this is essentially what was said. Maybe there's an that was misplaced or a the that was misplaced, but this is what was said by him, Dave Meltzer. This is what caused everything to explode on Thursday. Okay. Yeah. We had tweets. We had Blue Sky going apeshit insane nuts. Because the aggregation was WBD kept Brody King off TV. That was how it was reported, Trish. Am I insane on that one?
No, that's how it was reported. Yep.
That's how it was reported. WBD kept Brody King off television. Aggregated, yes. Do you, listening to what I just repeated, at any point does Dave Meltzer say WBD kept Brody King off television?
No, it says they don't want a chance.
They don't want the chance. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which they don't. I don't think there's, I get it. So this just turned into a giant thing and ended up with, on Thursday, we had a lot of people. We had Sean Ross Sapp. We had other outlets. We, very quick and happy to report that Brody King, wasn't kept off television. He was kept, then we had people reporting that Brody King was at TV. Then we had people reporting that Brody King was not at TV. And I'll let you speak to that in terms of like the flights and everything else. But
Sure.
Ultimately, it ended up with WBD releasing a statement, which they sent to every fucking buddy and their brother, including Social Suplex.
Yeah. Which is, considering we don't do press calls or anything like that.
Right.
And very surprising. But yeah, even us got it. Yeah.
It did. And they basically WBD sent the following statement. Warner Brothers Discovery did not have any involvement in Brody King's upcoming AEW schedule. Any speculation to the contrary is categorically false. Brody is scheduled to appear during the next AEW event, which will occur this Saturday on TNT and HBO Max. Of course, upcoming schedule, but not.
Yeah, well, they clarified they were included.
They did. There were some follow-up questions asked, but yeah, that's what started this, everybody. That's what kicked everything off, right? And this is wrestling, folks. We need better journalist standards. We need better journalists, period. And it's really kind of terrifying when Dave Meltzer is one of the best ones, which I think he arguably kind of is, that like we're still getting this. So yeah. So people are going nuts. People are saying Tony Khan wanted him off TV. People are trying to villainize Warner Brothers Discovery. People are trying to say Warner Brothers Discovery is you would never do something like this because people want, media has to be good. It just turned into a fucking shit show, right? And ultimately, Friday night, we had another episode of Wrestling Observer Radio, this time with Dave Meltzer and Garrett Gonzalez, where Dave had followed up and had questions and actually was able to admit that he spoke to Tony Khan, or at least, nobody knows if he spoke to Tony Khan before the February 11th show, but whatever. So Garrett started the show by asking, what is the whole situation with Brody King and why wasn't he on Dynamite? And Dave's comment was, again, transcribed from the show, So he wasn't on, according to Tony, because he didn't book him on the show. He felt, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on it, but he had a show, and he felt that because MJF was already over there to do media, that he didn't need to have Brody on the show. Brody actually flew out before. I mean, he could have flew out after. There were plenty of guys on the show that were wrestling on Saturday, and but it's tough, but I mean, Fletcher, who obviously won the title on the show, and then he kind of kept going, and then I clipped a little bit of it and got bored down to here.
Yeah, because he mentioned like Mox and Takeshi and Paige were all at the show.
He listed men, Trish.
Yeah.
He listed men.
Yeah.
Which men love to list men, but yeah. So, all right, Continuing the quote, this is Dave Meltzer again. And I guess he just said he didn't feel that Brody needed to be on the show. I mean, there was a lot of controversy from the week. He said that WBD, he said that WBD didn't say anything to him about it. From people, WBD, there was a lot of leeriness, I'm not saying that they put their foot down or anything like that, but the whole situation is a weird one. We're in a weird political situation. And, that was expressed to me days earlier that, the fuck ICE thing was not something that they wanted, ICE, like they were a sponsor of wrestling, which made a lot of people, and UFC, which made a lot of viewers very unhappy. And I saw those commercials way too many times. They're kind of unnerving in a lot of ways. But, so it's just a weird thing. And they're in the process of a major sale. That means governmental regulatory approval. So it's just a weird thing. Like I wrote in the issue, it's not like people chanting something at a wrestling show is any big deal that in and of itself. But the fact that it got so much publicity, that was the issue. It was like AEW got more mainstream publicity last week over that than almost anything they've done. Maybe when they had Shaq on, they got some, but this stuff. Maybe when they had Shaq on, they got some, but this was in a different place. This was like major news, like companies that covered it like a major news story. If it doesn't get media, that's fine. If it gets media, that's a problem. I talked to Tony about it, and he explained, it's just like he had a 2-hour and 20-minute show, and it was one of the better Dynamites there's ever been. And it, he just felt like he didn't need more than the video package. And Brody probably on that show would have come out and gotten a great reaction. And you kind of live for those things. There's a lot of forces at work right now because everybody wants this not to be a story, and it is an uncomfortable story. I maybe made too much of it. It's still a little uncomfortable story because it's a combination of a guy who, if he'd come out on that show, he'd have gotten the biggest pop of his entire career and a loud chant that they probably didn't want on the show necessarily. There was more, but that's kind of the best bit of it, I think, in terms of coherency and general gist of this. So I think, I don't know, Trish, looking at this, I think it's clear that the idea that AEW would become a lightning rod for people who want to believe or who are hoping that nobody wants this in our country, right? Or in my country, I guess. Nobody wants this in our country, and is hoping. I think one of the things that's hard to understate is there's sort of this sort of weird sense of anticipation sometimes, where I think a lot of Americans are waiting for something, and it might be something horrible, it might be something good, but I think there's a lot of folks that are just kind of like, who's going to stop this? Are they going to stop this? Is someone going to stand up and try and stop this? Are we going to have to stop this? Like, what are we doing? And I think for a lot of people who are so frustrated and upset and disgusted, the idea that someone with some kind of power or some kind of visibility would sort of stand up and say, no, this is not okay, is a really nice feeling, and we want to believe it because we want to believe that there's that the thing that's coming is a good thing. And I think in that regard, now I'm being as incoherent as Dave, it ties into a lot of this. And I think for wrestling fans, especially, there's a lot of wrestling fans, there's a lot of people who are in fandom of any kind these days who want to believe that the thing that they, and we're going to touch on this later in the show, the thing that they love is an inherently good thing that is being created for them by inherently good people. And the idea that WBD or Tony Khan or whoever would not allow Brody King to be on the show because they didn't want to hear these chants because, for whatever reason, was upsetting. And I get that. But I don't know. It's just turned into something that, in some ways, it's a very black and white issue, and in some ways, it's not a very black and white issue.
Yeah, maybe I'll just go with shades of grey, because I think maybe it's different sitting outside as well of the US. But it's a funny one because there's so many kind of things that they could easily have done to kind of clean stuff up around this situation, because the only thing that you can absolutely say 100% sure right now is that they don't want it to be a story.
No,
and that
they do
meant
not.
that when, I think they anticipated there would be chants at Grand Slam on Saturday. There was. They kind of cut to commercial during like the entrance, just after the entrances, and come back, and they had them about 15 seconds. And they left them in. They actually edited some stuff out early in the show. Not the Utah chant, which, if that was in the UK, I don't think it would make it.
Yes,
so
the chant was
funny,
Utah
right?
is a shit cunt. So,
yeah. The C word is, it gets used a bit much here, just like in Australia, but he would have made it.
Yeah.
No, I think, and at that point, in heat of not wanting it to become a story, the last thing that they would have done was edited it. Like,
yes.
Absolutely do not edit. And then, I think anyone that can see where this would go, the biggest things that would cause another news story, as we've seen, is saying, like, Brody would now be restricted, or we're going to edit these chants continuously. Because then you give the impression of the network kind of wanting to hold these things back. And it's kind of interesting because it's not the first time that this has come up with AEW. Obviously, it came up in the fall last year when they had signs and that removed from shows, particularly in Florida, when Adam Page went on Blue Sky and basically said, email WBD, get rid of these ICE adverts,
Yep.
And, they were removing signs and that sort of thing. You won't get any answer as to who was the direction behind that. Was that something done by the arena? Was that something done by WBD? Was that an AEW initiative? We don't know. And with this one, so I can see why people would look at Brody not being on this show and think, what the fuck's going on, right? Because you've just got a guy getting all this press.
Yes.
And not just that, even from a character perspective. So this was a guy that was always going to get beaten a TV defense, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
The win that you get in the kind of eliminator match to set up the title match on Grand Slam is not about him. It's about Hangman, right?
Right.
That's because it's a setup for the pay-per-view match. So, in a way, because of the way that you did that finish, you could really do with the babyface going and cutting like a huge promo on the next show with a big crowd response, getting really behind and getting really invested in watching Grand Slam, which is up against a huge amount of competition from Saturday, from the All-Star, whatever they do
Slam
for
dunk
NBA,
contest.
Slam dunk contest. Fucking watch basketball.
No, I'm laughing at Dave being really obsessed with the slam dunk contest.
Yeah, I don't watch basketball, sorry.
No.
But the Winter Olympics, USC show, there was a load of different competitions. So you really want to get people invested. But you've just had your babyface kind of challenger, immediate challenger, kind of get a fluke win thanks to the guy that's going to challenge at the pay-per-view. So actually you need to get the focus back on them. And, if you watch Max's promo on Collision, it was all about Paige, right? So he's looking past him. So actually you need to kind of just move the audience back to this guy's a challenger, this guy's a babyface. So I actually thought, for just from a character perspective, I thought he really needed even if Max was in Australia, they've been very clear on that for some reason and not on Brody's status.
Yeah.
Which is weird. So we know, I was told from a senior source in AEW that he flew earlier, similar to what Brian Alvarez was told over at Wrestling Observer. And then you have other people, and BJ Bethel reported it, that saw him at the venue. So it's like, and they're being very kind of, there's wordplay on the flight stuff, and I don't understand that, just clear that up. But he doesn't go because, right, so even if he goes, because MJF's gone, well, there's no reason why he can't go out and do a solo promo. I'm sorry, that one I don't understand, because if you want to make as much out of a TV title challenge to be able to then elevate him afterwards, and you do that, on the sounds of that, you also got the situation that, for whatever reason, he does no press this week at all. All the press in Australia is done by the heel champion, and none by the babyface challenger. And I can kind of understand that because, again, you don't want it to become a bigger story, right? And if he says anything,
right,
it's going to get picked up, not just by wrestling outlets, but mainstream outlets.
Right.
We've just had a CNN thing this weekend. So, which finally acknowledged that it's a WBD platform acknowledging that WBD have an ownership stake in AEW, which has long been rumoured and Tony's never denied or confirmed. He does that thing where he talks around something where he doesn't really want to deny, he won't make an actual denial, right? So, because it's the truth, according to CNN, who are part of WBD. So it's like, you don't want to make a news story, but it means that he gets no big babyface promo, leading up to the show. Their segment was chucked in at 2 minutes to 10, which is really unusual, actually. So if you think about a lot of when they've done big Collision things, even when it was back when Punk was there, everything gets chucked in at quarter 4, quarter 5 on a crossover, because most people, the viewership, is especially over 50s. It kind of 60, 75 minutes and then they start to peter out. So you normally put something, if you've got something like that, in Q1 or Q5 rather than shoving it right at the end of your show. So that was a strange spot for it. Then you get on to doing it, they do the show, so it's pretty standard kind of title defense. Probably didn't have the heat that it would have had in the US, I think. And it came straight after the ladder match. So I kind of feel for them in that aspect. And then Brody cuts a promo afterwards. It's on social media. And he says, I won't be back to the 25th, which is in Denver. Mission Ballroom. Incredible venue, by the way. Very, very cool. But it's so then from that perspective, it's you're telling him that he's coming back because you don't want them to think that he's, going to be away from TV or there's any sort of reason for it. He's not on TV this week. But if you're looking for some sort of capitalization for that character or someone being moved up or someone kind of getting more attention for them, then that's not happening. And that is something where you can question what's going on here, because is that just, booking? We've seen it. Bandito got his title match, disappeared until this weekend. So it's not that unusual for that to happen. But in terms of where all this is happening, you would have thought they would have done more. So there's no capitalization on it. But it's like balancing rope, isn't it? You're like tightrope walking. So do I believe that somebody told Dave Meltzer that WBD would have an issue with fuck-ass shouts? Yeah, I don't see why he would lie about that. I don't think he has. Has he used it to influence on something else? Perhaps, yeah. But it is something that they all have to manage, because I think there's this perception that I think the CNN thing kind of, put on it. And this is, I do agree with, this is a perception that and I think this is put on because some of the audience wants this, that AEW needs to be this left-wing company.
Yep.
And it needs to be, representative of kind of a lot of its fan base, because especially a lot of the live fan base, because a lot of these shows are in, residential areas, big cities that will be majority kind of perhaps Democratic voting in the main part.
Blue states.
Blue states, and not just that, but even when they're on red states, they're on Austin, Texas, right?
Right.
So there's a perception that people want the company to reflect their own values.
Yes.
And that's not possible. Like they have, like the idea of and I think there's a difference, right? So that's not to say that you need to be completely apolitical. I think they actually get the balance right in so many senses of being, we are apolitical, but we allow our talent to show
be
their
political.
views.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
to show their
yes.
views, to indicate who they are, what they believe in, their standpoints. And that doesn't mean that things aren't kind of monitored or there aren't directions, because of course there will be. I think it's daft to think that there won't be at times. But that's the line that they have to be in, because yes, they are on WBD. WBD is going through potential sale. There's talk now this morning that Paramount might be back involved and not just Netflix. You do have to get it through regulatory and through this government and through Donald Trump, who's been very vocal on that potential sale. You don't want the kind of political attention of brandishing as you as something, because you will alienate other parts of your fan base. And it's as much as I think online, majority of the base is very left-wing. It's very hard to see, but where your makeup of your kind of audience is, and that it's not all like that. So I think they get the line right of making it about their performers can express their views and not themselves. And they've actually had to keep, they've kept very media strong. They've answered nothing from anybody in the last week. And that's probably the right thing for them to do.
It's not just the audience, though. It's also the wrestlers, too. Let's not kid ourselves and believe that every wrestler in the locker room at any wrestling company is a shining example of progressive thought and liberalism. So,
of course
AEW choosing a political identity has an impact on their, who's going to work for them, the same way that WWE choosing a political identity has potentially got an impact on who's going to choose to work for them.
And WWE do that thing where they pretend they're kind of apolitical as well. Right. Obviously, that's much harder now because of how close Paul Levesque and Linda McMahon are to the Trump administration, right?
Right.
But they're still doing that thing with, they saw Paul Levesque tweeting about Bad Bunny at the Super Bowl halftime show.
Yeah.
It's because you're still doing that thing where you pretend you're apolitical, but everybody knows where you are on the scale different. But also, your fan base also wants to pretend that. They also want to still associate them values. That's why they showed the Trump clip at SummerSlam in New York, and it got booed. Right? So they want to see it the same way as well, because we live in an era, and this will come back later, where people want the brands that they're associated with, they want the wrestlers that they're associated with, or the people, or everything like that, to represent their values as well.
Right. And
they want to attach them to them, and it's probably never been more as important as it is now, because things are much, much more tribalistic and much more extreme. Politics feels more extreme in the impact that it has on people's lives than what potentially, especially in the West, I'm not going to say that's everywhere because it's not, but in the West it feels like that more since, the 80s, 70s, Cold War, what is it? But it does feel like it has more impact on people's lives on an everyday basis than it ever has for our lifetimes. And that means that the way people interact with other things is now reflected in politics. So it's very hard for them. I think sometimes I see some stuff that I think is surreal, like, if WWD were to do this, then get rid of them. Like, that's not how this media landscape works, This is a period of time where Jimmy Kimmel nearly got took off the air. He did get taken off the air and brought back.
Stephen Colbert got cancelled.
Yeah, Trump sued the BBC. Yep. It's like, it's a difficult time for media companies, plus all the uncertainty, plus the transition to streaming, and, we've seen some of the big incurrent debts, sort of Peacock results very recently, and how that impacts everything. So it's not an easy environment for them to operate in, so I wouldn't be surprised if there was additional caution. I'm not saying they did anything here, I'm just saying that that's the environment they work in, and that's also the environment that wrestling companies are operating in as well. So you do your best to manage it. Do I think, it's, and people can go, it's great attention for Brody, but it's only great attention for Brody if they're able to use it and to capitalise on it. And that's the only thing when you look at him not doing media this week, and, they're going to give him a week off and going to come back in Denver. He should get a big response in Denver. I expect the chance there as well. Colorado makes complete sense. But it's a difficult line to cross. And I think when we talk about it, I think it's very easy to simplify it, because then you're looking for like a someone who's responsible, right? So it's like, oh, did Tony do this, or did WVD do this? And it's like, no, everyone's trying to navigate a narrow path in a very difficult media environment and difficult political environment, and also, navigate the makeup of their audience and their wrestlers and their staffers and everything else. So it's just a very narrow line to walk, and that's what has to happen. It's not black and white. It's not simple. You can't just say, oh, they need to be this, or they need to be that, or they need to be this virtue of kind of progressive
paragon.
Form. Yeah, they got a paragon. That didn't go well. But it's...
I think it's
difficult.
No, I think it's similar to what you said about, yes, you can look at the way things are handled with regard to Brody's booking and or video packages, and I think there's probably something you can say there about some of it. But at the end of the day, they've had opportunities to elevate people for non-political reasons and have failed to do it. And we talk repeatedly about how they very rarely let baby faces talk, or baby faces don't usually get the momentum or the agency when it comes to their booking. So it's hard to point at it and be like, this is a definitive example.
But they had one on the same show. They had Carl Fletcher, a heel,
right,
declaring he wants a ladder match with the babyface.
Right.
Who did nothing to earn the rematch other than, after he lost it to Tommaso Ciampa. So it's like, that's not uncommon. I just think that if they wanted to maximise it and do more of him, they would have done.
I agree. But I think the odds that they wanted to do anything with him and maximise it were slim to begin with. I mean, This just feels like if you look at the pattern of AEW, this feels like a basic TV booking defense, which again, the TV shows, not to downplay them, the TV shows have been great. And the fact that we've had more title defenses and more matches with stakes is part of why the shows have been so much more enjoyable lately. I'm not trying to downplay that at all. But
I think that's his second pre-announced title defense. I think that's more than the past two champions have had on TV.
Right.
Yeah, Paige had one, the boxing one, that was it.
Yep.
The only other one wasn't pre-advertised, and Joe had one. So yeah, in a month and a half, they've given him more, title defences. So, and it's the same with the kind of number one contenders. And they always have that opportunity, don't they, because it's the first part of the year. So there's no monthly pay-per-view cycle, so it makes them much easier. I think it's no secret if you look at when they've done similar sets of TV, it was before All In last year, where you had top guys interacting with each other and wrestling and that sort of thing. And the Revolution build for 2024. So it's Joe Swerve Page one?
I think...
24? Yeah.
I also think that, and some of this is me just straw man arguing, but I think this idea that AEW has to be, Tony Khan should tell WB to fuck off or all this other stuff is like...
You can't do that.
He can't do that. They pay him a lot of money, and that money allows him to employ a lot of people and have people pay jobs. And yes, I understand that Tony Khan is a billionaire, but at some point, he can't just put the show on in empty warehouses. That's just not, what I mean? Somebody has to air it on television. And I don't know. I all of this is to say that, this is a very complicated and fucked up time we're living in. And I get that people are desperately searching for someone and a moral high ground to hold on to, because God fucking knows I am too. I'm just not sure that wrestling is the place to find it, And I think, if your activism is tweeting about this, then please go do something else with your time. I don't know. It's hard. Yes, in a perfect world... But in a perfect world, we wouldn't even having to be safe fuck guys, because they wouldn't be dragging people out of their cars from their beds and fucking hauling them off to God knows where and to do what, God knows what. So the whole thing is just really goddamn depressing.
Yeah. I'll ask a question that Rich brought up from Richmond One Nation Radio. Do you think that there will be people that take more political gimmicks on rather than just expressing how they feel about something personally as we go forward? Because of how contentious everything is right now. I
mean, political gimmicks are just terrible to begin with. I don't know. I don't think they're particularly good gimmicks. I don't there was that brief period of time where people thought Ricochet was doing like an incel gimmick and lost their minds over it. I just, kind of justifiably so. I think there are things you can hint at without fully going, mask off political. I don't think a heel can turn what's happening right now into something useful to them.
I guess because in the past that's what people would have done, right?
Yeah.
You think about the Gulf War and the Sergeant Slaughter or whatever. That would be something that people would play off. It would be dangerous, but it's one of them things where you think, do people just think, oh, it's something else to make money out of it, rather than, I think that, for me, I think they have the line right at the moment, in terms of...
I agree.
We allow people to illustrate their views within, and there'd be constructs, but it's like, but we are apolitical as a company. But also, for them, it's like they've always been seen as slightly more progressive because just from the makeup of the roster alone from the very start,
Right. That they had, trans athletes and LGBT athletes and there was no sort of sense of... Yeah, and they were
very open about that. And then also it's a very international roster.
Yes. There are a lot of people from other countries who, choose to come here, and a lot of Hispanic wrestlers, I don't know. I mean, and I also think you'd like to think that the backstage environment is also part of it. Like, well, when you look at those photos from Unreal of the backstage at WWE and everybody looks exactly the same, and you look at the photos of like, hey, these are the agents at WWE and everybody looks exactly the same. And I'm not going to say that AEW has the correct proportion, like, the population proportion of non-white men in high levels of power. But like, let's face it, at the end of the day, the company's owned by a non-white person, right? So there certainly is an inherent kind of like, hey, there's something different here, right?
From their public image alone, that's what you'll see, yeah.
Right. So, I don't know. I think it's a difficult line for them to hold, and I agree with you that I think they've done a pretty decent job of being like, you can say whatever you want as long as you're not being an asshole. Where, again, you can contrast that with WWE, where it's clear that there is a directive that certain topics cannot be broached by wrestlers and other employees.
Well, that's always, excuse me, that's always kind of been the case. Like, you can't wear anything political on their programming. They now don't acknowledge kind of anything. They've done nothing for Black History Month.
Nope.
And a lot of
Didn't they tweet? I thought they tweeted.
I don't think they even tweeted.
I thought I saw something, but maybe that was fan made or not. I think anti-fan made.
The only thing I've seen in terms of where you could potentially say is political is kind of support, and it's sad that we have to say it's political, it's a support for Bad Bunny for the Super Bowl.
Right.
And it's that shouldn't be a political statement, but the current, under the current conditions it is, right?
Non-white men existing is a political statement at this point.
It's crazy. It's actually insane and scary, right?
I have a stomachache.
Yeah, it's but yeah, that's the only thing. But in terms of, it's difficult for especially their talent to reflect their viewpoint, and then also you have kind of so something look at like Sami Zayn, right? So he does Sami for Syria, and he raises a huge amount of money for people who have been involved in civil war, conflict, regime change, all sorts of things, suffering in Syria. And then he works in Saudi Arabia, and it's like, so people will look and go, and he works for WWE, so it's like they judge him on, do you judge him on his good days, or do you judge him on how you see it because of where he's gone politically, and, is he part of the kind of sports washing? It's difficult. I think things are complex as well in terms of that too, so, yeah, anyway, yeah, complicated. Should we move on? I think we should move on.
Yes, we've basically tried to cover this as best we can and give you guys a sense of like how something comes out of nothing. And at the end of the day, if there's nothing else that I can tell you, it's to please God consider where some of this stuff is coming from, especially when it's aggregation of what Dave Meltzer has said. Like, because sometimes it's really clear as to what he's talking about. Even when he's not clear, it's clear. And then other times it's like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah, and if you read the Observer section on Friday, I sent it to you because I was like, I don't get what is going on here. And I think it's been very careful. I think legally it's been very careful. I think it was like, It's complicated. I think the other thing I would say from this is, and I had a conversation with someone about this last month, where something that was said to me in terms of feedback from things I'm working on at the moment is you can be much clearer about who your sources are than we traditionally think in wrestling, right? So you can say, I spoke to somebody from WBD, or I spoke to somebody from AEW. I think sometimes what you see, and I think maybe particularly from Dave, but I've been guilty of it. I did some stuff with the Tanahashi one where I wasn't completely clear on who the sources were. And if I was, it takes a lot of kind of argument away over, what's this, what's that? Because what was said to me is you have to protect yourself more than you need to protect your sources.
Yeah.
And I think this was a clear example where Dave didn't protect himself, even though I thought it was quite clear that he had spoken to somebody and been given this information. But if you make it clear as where to the sources come from, you're not killing a source by saying that, by saying, somebody from WBD who spoke to me, or, someone high up in AEW. That doesn't hurt the source, right?
No.
It will put questions back on that media partner or that company, but so be it. Like, that's the subject that we're talking about. But you have to protect yourself, because otherwise all you do is undervalue your own kind of work. And then you have that distrust in the media and that sort of thing that we get and that we've seen so, predominantly in the last 10, 15 years. And then you get your shit in the vacuum, that comes out of that. So, yeah, you got to protect yourself a little bit more. I think he didn't... That's the biggest thing I think he didn't do, was if he'd been much more clearer in terms of, this is where this came from, this is why I think this may happen, then it's a non-story.
Well, I think this is one of the biggest drawbacks of Dave on audio, is that it is only sometimes clear whether he is reporting something or suggesting something or posing a hypothetical based on the tone of voice, right?
Yeah.
And that's not something I think you can do, because it leads to way too much, like you said, it damages your own reputation, and it allows for a shit ton of people who now immediately say Dave doesn't know anything, Dave doesn't talk to anybody, which is fucking bullshit, right? Like, it's fucking bullshit. The guy knows shit. He talks to people. Like, let's don't fucking kid yourself. Like, you can tell when he doesn't know anything and doesn't talk to people, because you hear stuff that you know. But like, there's times where it's like
the current Will Ospreay stuff might be a good example.
Anything in New Japan. No, I'm just kidding. But there's times where you're like, oh, okay, like, we will hear something and it will be very different to what Dave is reporting or Dave is suggesting, right? And we're like, okay, this is not a report, this is whatever. But at the end of the day, whether you're reporting it or suggesting, and I think it's a good lesson for everybody, and God knows one that we can take too, because nobody is fucking perfect. Like, just fucking say it. If somebody told you something, say, I heard this. You don't have to say who it is. Just say that you fucking heard it. Like, I don't know. I think sometimes, like you said, with wrestling, it's just too much about that kind of like, I don't want anybody to know that I know something or that I don't know something, or that,
You're just protecting people. You feel like you need to protect them because of the way that information is shared, mostly kind of offhand or, off the record sort of thing. And you can kind of hint at it, but you can't say, like, because, and I guess that's kind of similar to politics, but in politics, people will say, a source from the government told me this, or a source
off the record, or
the civil service told me this, and that's probably what we need to do more of to ensure that there's more clarity and less kind of this
confusion.
Quite frankly,
right.
So and that's a lesson for everyone. And something that was said straight to me was like, you can just make this so much cleaner without having any issues whatsoever. And that's what you need to do. So, I think that's an important lesson.
Especially since 9 times out of 10, if they're telling you, they want you to tell other people.
Yeah, oh God. Yeah, like everyone
want you to know.
There's an agenda, right?
Yes, there's always a fucking agenda.
And yes. The key is being able to find everybody's agenda and then piecing it all together, right?
Yes.
That's not how, rather than just, I was told this one piece of information.
They're not telling you for nothing.
And sometimes they just tell you stuff because it's fucking funny.
Yes.
Like, I told you a story about like Naito being up in like, they thought he was like Phantom of the Opera, the way he used to disappear at shows. Like, that's just fucking funny shit. Like,
it is good.
Right. So
journalism.
This is what happens when we record in the afternoon, right?
Afternoon for you, morning for me. I'm living my best life.
This is your afternoon, right? You're on British
This
time.
I am on British
Let's
time.
Let's not pretend that you're on US time.
I'm not on US time.
Recapping Observer Radio at 4 a.m. in the morning.
Listen. Not lately. It's too... All right, anyway, okay. Grand Slam.
Yeah. Oh,
it was a show that occurred.
No. So
and a house show that nobody went to.
The attendance thing is kind of it's an example of what we've seen in the past in the US and that as well, of shooting yourself in the foot a little bit. So they ran the it's kudos, you say it. Every Australian shouting at me now. Yeah, Andrew's like gonna kill me and Frankie's gonna kill me. But that arena was next door to Accor Stadium, which had a Ed Sheeran concert with 75,000 people. So it's the Beyonce Atlanta thing, right? All over again. Yeah, for Evolution. It's the same shit, right? Why on earth? And it's Valentine's Day, and the tickets are more expensive in general than they were last year. I'm like, who is responsible for this? Maybe they're not there now. They've had a lot of changes in the live department, and we've seen lots of changes in terms of pricing and that sort of thing in the US, especially. You know, the days of the $55 to get into the theatres that we saw majority of last year, which was absolutely batshit to me. That's gone now, thankfully. You know, every theatre show that they've done so far this year has been $35 in pretty much entry, which is a much, much better strategy. But yeah, for the Australian shows, they just abandoned all that. They ran a house show at big prices. They ended up even giving us tickets away on the last day. Didn't advertise anything. Didn't advertise any matches.
Was that a sold show, Trish, or did they run that on their own?
It looks... It's hard to say. Like, it looks, in a way, like a bought show. But the reason I wouldn't think it is because of the sheer lack of talent that they sent. And that's not to deprive of the people that they did send, but they sent like a quarter of the roster. You know? If it had been a bought show, you could have just sent your entire roster for me. What I did find interesting with that as well, and, you know, I talk about this all the time in the past, but my God, how does it keep happening? So that original kind of advertisement, there were like 7 people on the original advertisement, and they sent 4. So Darby didn't go, Swerve Strickland didn't go, who was advertised to only a few weeks back, Mercedes Moné didn't go. It's like, stop doing that. Especially when it's your second time in the market. You don't have TV, because they've lost TV. They're on Disney Plus now solely on streaming. They're not on ESPN as they were last year. And you know second time in the market's going to be down, so you need to do more, and they did less. So, you know, in terms of promotion, build, work, ticket pricing was crazy. So, you know, the numbers they got is what they got, and that's a representative of all those factors. So it's probably, you look at it and think, yeah, they would have wanted more. But there wasn't a good job done there on that side. Crowd was okay. I didn't think they were massively into anything. Which, it's hard because it's funny because it is very much, it's in some ways it's similar to the UK, that it's very WWE orientated in terms of the crowd.
Yes. We hear this a lot from Australians, that WWE is very popular in Australia.
Yeah, and you can see it. So when Bandido came out, right, they're always expecting to turn or him to be involved, because that's what you expect when that happens with WWE, right? They go, comes down, he gets turn, and that's the end of the match. And then they kind of do it, and then it's just like, oh, okay, we don't really know. Structure of the show. So they put some really good stuff on the show in terms of, I think their best shows are generally the ones where it's just mostly wrestling.
I agree.
You know, kind of top level wrestling. Structure-wise was interesting. So you started out with like Moxley Takeshita, and they go to a draw, which I think was what everybody kind of expected. And then Moxley did the... did you see that he did the... he improvised, and he went to the referee and just said, make him give me my finisher, because the crowd were booing the draw, because they don't have draws.
No.
So he went and said to the ref, and the ref gets a message to Takeshi, give him my finisher, which is weird, because Takeshi's still in this tweener position, Moxley's still doing the tweener thing, where Death Riders are back to being the BCC, and it's all situational, and it never really helps anybody by doing that, but that's what we do. And Takeshi, they need to get that turn on. You know, if you're going to do that DCF split, you need to get on with that too. If you have him and Fletcher, and Fletcher's got a belt, you do a freeway with them and Okada, and maybe you merge them. I don't know what the fuck you do, but they need to move on with that, because like the longer it goes to Takeshita, the more you lose that momentum that you had at the end of last year with him. So But yeah, it was fine. The last minute was very good. I don't think it was any more than that. Crowd being very WWE orientated, like chanting "We want tables" in that and in the Andrade Hangman match. Well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had the women's tag. They had a debut at the end, which they did a heel debuting that's from Australia. So I got cheered. But crazy. But yeah, that was fine. I think that's one where with Bozaraf, they have the popularity. I don't think Harley was as big as she was last year.
No.
But that's also a first time in a market crowd, right? Because you can see,
Correct.
if you go back and look at All In the first year and look at All In the second year, the reactions are completely different, right?
Yes.
The first year they react to fucking everything. They go crazy for everything. The second year they pick and choose, and you can see it with like the casino gauntlet, and it's like sometimes it's just silence. So that's something about being second time in market as well. But it's fine. I think you've got to do something else with it because Realo's got the TBS championship. You're not really capitalising on that. You beat Mercedes, make something out of it. We're not really doing that. But that's the belt thing. It's just, here's what it is at this point. Then they do Andrade and Hangman. So I want to ruin my own reputation. This is going to be fun, isn't it?
Do it. Why not?
Yeah, cool. So, who did you think should have won that match going in?
I mean, I kind of expected Hangman was going to win.
Yeah.
I would have preferred Andrade to win because I think whatever Swerve and Kenny have going on is going to be more interesting with Hangman sort of tangentially involved than Hangman losing to MJF. Mm-hmm. But, again, I'm realistic. MJF at some point was going to want his win back. It was a good match the first time, 2 times they did it. It'll be a good match this time. It's fine. MJF has been such a non-factor in the television that it's hard to envision how this feud's going to go. So it was so funny because when I said like it compared to like the Swerve, Joe and Hangman program in 2024, and our friend like Mark was just like, yeah, but this time they left, like, Joe was part of it last time, this time they left MJF at the hotel. And I just started laughing. That's like that thing where it's like, it's funny where it's like, well, MJF is in a feud with all these guys. And I'm like, is he in a feud with all these guys or are all these guys talking to each other while MJF is busy with, mid-card title defenses, essentially? Not to shit on Brody or Bandito, but...
but again, you can have someone as the obstacle, and like as long as there's a thing they're challenging for. But yeah, I think the dynamic between the three of them has been more interesting than anything else on the show, and it's kind of reinvigorated people. And I know there's some people who are disappointed, like, well, why couldn't they just for Hangman? And it's like, you don't want me to answer that, but it's like, but yeah, like you figured it out now. Okay, you have to keep that going. As you can see with like the Swerve Kenny thing, there are some pull-offs. Right, it's not as straightforward as I think as people think, oh, this person's lined up, this person's lined up, this person's lined up. Right. There's a reason why, you look at where you got to Revolution and now you're back to kind of square one, and people were kind of going, well, why are we back here? We thought we were going to get something new. And it's kind of been interesting because you've now got this thing where people want people, like they want people to move up, right? They want people to move up in different spots. They want to see new matches. They want to see new people in the main events. And that kind of staticness in terms of the top of the roster is something we've spoken about for years. And all of a sudden it's kind of hit everybody.
Right, everybody else is talking about it.
It's kind of funny, right? And then it's like, oh, yeah, and like, but Paige is still in the main event. And it's like, yeah, he's there for MJF to get to finish his like little story and then get his win back. He's not there to like benefit him. In fact, if he's wanting to benefit him, he wouldn't be in a fucking match. He'd Cody it. You could do like a Cody and just go, just drop the title because of that. But this is the thing with this one. I would have absolutely rather have had Andrade win. And I know that it's like heel versus heel, but I think he's going tweener anyway. They're doing the stuff with Don Callis. You could have done that. It's a fresh matchup, but also it's like, because he's like, you've given him things that make him feel hot, right? So you gave him the pathway of beating Swerve and beating Omega. And you tried to do the get out of it to make him a heel by doing the low blows and then bringing it into this match. But I don't think it worked. And this is the thing about this, right? I don't think this is the right time for MJF and Paige. And look, they were going to work properly hard at trying to make this work. Paige isn't going to turn it down, doesn't turn anything down. But
it's going to turn it to be something that they'll make something out of this. I agree.
Yeah, and you can see the story to it, right? That's what I said to someone. I said to someone the other week. I said, look, I can see what you're doing. Right? I can see that you did. So the idea, the logic is, Paige loses the title to Joe because of Hook, right? So he's screwed out of it. He tries to get it back. MJF screws him. You know, he gives him the low blow and then takes out Joe, wins the belt. And then you are supposed to want this babyface who's been screwed over twice. It's actually 3 times if you include the turn on from Joe to WrestleDream. You are supposed to want him to get that belt back then at Revolution, and then you can do the things where, you know, Paige is also doing a thing where he's not blaming himself, he's blaming others around him for the first time, so he's not taking accountability. You can do that, you build that into it, and basically the idea is that you swerve all the way back to Revolution last year when it was MJF doing all them traits, you know. Right. So that's the idea. The problem is that on paper, that sounds lovely, but that's not what you've done. You've not made anyone want this babyface to win. What you actually did was you geeked him out of WrestleDream, you geeked him out of Full Gear in disastrous fashion. You didn't even have the courage to do it, so you built it so that people wanted the babyface to win it back, because straight away you bring Swerve Strickland into the mix, which we spoke about at the time, because the people that actually listened and bothered to listen to us at the time would understand that we illustrated where this was going to go and the issues with him as a babyface, rather than just thinking we want him to win all the fucking time because no one of you listen. But the point is that you killed him there as a babyface, right? Then you bring in another babyface back and return him, who's obviously going to be hotter because, one, we haven't just geeked him twice out, and 2, he's coming back fresh, right? Then you bring MJF back and he does whatever he does. And it's like, so there is no momentum for wanting this babyface to win anything back. And you can hear it, like, you can see he does that thing that Jericho does at World End, where you can listen to the crowd and he can hear it, right? Everyone else can hear it. Apparently a couple of people can't hear it, but that's because you're not fucking wanting to listen. And then you go into this new year, and you don't do anything there as well. So you then bring Omega involved into it. Again, someone that's not been involved in the title scene since, what? I mean, he had the quick match with MJF. I don't really think that counts, to be honest. But probably not since he held the belt, you know? So you bring him back into it as well. And then all of a sudden it's like, which babyface are you going to want to see in, like, those title fights? Then you bring a new guy in, right, who's a heel, but he's fresh because he's come back in from WWE, so that gives you also, you know, always a little bit of momentum. And then he's the guy with the harder path, not the babyface. Yeah. The babyface doesn't have to earn anything, and it's like...
I was going to bring this up. I mean, he beat Kenny and Swerve, and Hangman just beat Mark Davis.
Yeah, and
so it's kind of like...
Exactly, right? It makes the babyface look like he had it fucking easy. That's not good babyface booking. No. Like... That's just like, it's backwards. So then you get this thing where he feels overexposed because he's been geeked out 3 pay-per-views in a row, right?
Right.
So people don't want him to see him in the back because you've not made them want to do that. He can't do that. He's stuck cutting the same fucking promo because you never actually overcome the original thing. And then when you went to do it with Joe, you couldn't, but then you didn't replace it. So then he's on a back foot. And then it's like... And then you've got the, you know, the heel champion kind of playing babyface and all his media and stuff. That's fine, that's what you want to do. But it's like, you're not making it any easier for yourself. And so it's one of those things. I said this to people last week. I said, you've not done enough. You've not done enough to re-establish him as the babyface if you wanted him to challenge here. Because of all the damage that you did in the fall. And it's in the winter. And then bringing in other people in. You took away the warmth to see the babyface get revenge. And then you geeked him anyway. So it's like, it's really poor babyface booking on that instance. And it's like, it's hard because people see it and they see, like, we've got all these new challengers now, you know, that they've actually lined people up. It's the opposite of what they did with Paige in the fall, you know, where they had no one for him and it was like barren. He was having to work with fucking scraps. That's not to say, but, you know, in, you know, level of comparison with who you've got. And it's like, and then you didn't have these stories underneath that were strong enough that we now want to get. Where now you have the Kenny and Swerve thing spinning off, and I'm glad that they have done that. I know it's not their original form of how they were going to do it, you know, with the DCF stuff and whatever else they were going to do when Swerve originally returned, but at least we've got there. But yeah, it leaves him in a difficult position where I actually think he'd be much, much, much better off just doing fucking trios matches right now, being away from the main title, you know, re-establishing yourself as a winning babyface, a geek, and being able to, you know, not even needing to cut massive promos or anything, just go out there, do your 6-mans and fucking wrestle. And yeah, they probably only got the 6-man's belt because Hobbs had to go, right?
Yeah, but you'd
so
think
that's my
they'd at least be
decision.
able to defend it, because if you want to talk about cooling people off, but they've also cooled off Kevin Knight and Speedball to some degree, because they don't feel as hot as they did at one point, because they've effectively disappeared off television themselves, and it's kind of like, what's going on with these guys?
Yeah, and they'll do the video stuff with Kevin Knight, because they're like, that's the long-term guy they want to invest in that group, and I get that. But yeah, you'd be better off considering, and someone said to me, one of the defenses was, yeah, but like, look at the numbers. Like they said, quarters are good, with him and Swerve and Omega and also Andrade. And I'm like, well, yeah, but, and he's like, and merch-wise, the Jet Set Radio stuff is like one of the top sellers, I think it's the top seller last month. All that stuff, it's still good. Announcing for live stuff, it's still good too. I can see that. And it's so funny to be someone that's like so obsessed with metrics as me, because I'm properly like numbers. But to be like, I can fucking hear it. You can all hear it. Like, you can see that you've cooled this character down, right? To the point where he's not. And and I also say, look at his pay-per-view record. Look at Max's pay-per-view record. Obviously, this is like now traditionally the second biggest show of the year. It's the biggest like-for-like number they've got to compete with. You do 140k last year. So, yeah, it all makes sense on paper, but you've not delivered that, and you've not protected the babyface. Just wanted to read something. Oh, it's kind of funny that anyone thought they were going other way, because Max has been shouting at pretty much everybody in every promo that it's Hangman, and also, I thought it was done when Maximum and Carnage, when they did the Bandito match and Hangman opened the show, and they said, we're going to do the thing with Joe. And I thought, okay, yeah, because you're trying to give him a big win, and then you do the end bit into the Max thing, so you give him some sort of triumph that he's got over this situation, and then you get him back in, and then you can do it. But that's where I thought that that's where we're doing this. It wasn't going to be Kenny. Kenny's not going to be most likely at Revolution. If he is, he's not wrestling, because he's got the Capcom thing in Japan that he was contracted for before Revolution was announced. They weren't going to do Swerve Strickland here. I'm not going to say any more on that. Nope. John Moxley found himself a belt. And then he's got another he's got programs lined up for the summer now. Maybe we should tell Dave Meltzer that one. It's funny. Sorry, Dave. It's funny. But the kind of the point is like, this was your only option for this match. So for this show, really, unless you were going to go with someone new, and they're not willing to sometimes because they see the metrics, so they think like, we need to safeguard these metrics, so they go with the easy choice. I think this is only like the third or fourth show that's involved people that have not been previous WWE champions or New Japan champions, world champions. That's how few of these we've actually had main events without them. And I imagine they're going to add a stip. I would probably stay away from Texas Deathmatch, just because we already killed the cage dip on him last year. Maybe, leave the babyface with something. Because otherwise, you're going to get this thing now where he's going to cut the promos and say, I'm going to end you, I'm going to do this and that. And you're not. So, and you're going to play that into the story, and, keep telling me they're going to play into the story, and it's like he's going to be his position that Max was. Max actually didn't change anything, although they're playing that, he's trying to do things the fair way. He's actually trying to be influenced by what Paige said to him in the fall. Whatever. But it's like, it's another one of babyfaces making promises and not being able to deliver, and eventually that damages them. And our friend Matt, sorry about Super Bowl, by the way. Sorry.
We knew we weren't winning. I said we weren't winning it. Yeah, I didn't think it was happening.
But I don't know if he did or not.
I think he did.
You think he did? I just think he's very passionate about the Patriots. I get it.
He cares more about it than I do, that's for sure.
I don't know. Yeah, fair enough. I can't even begin to be passionate about the Mets half the time these days. Anyway, no, I can't. When you get to April, I'll be like, yeah, they're gonna get somewhere, and then the Dodgers is gonna be everyone. But he sent a message after our heel discussion. I actually ended up kind of focusing on baby faces at the end last week. I'm just gonna read what he wrote. So he said, God, I sound like Dave now, I'm saying all the time. The end of the podcast with a babyface heel talk was great. Thank you. Bringing up Hogan, Austin, and you could go on really. They've just brainwashed people into thinking that the only way to build a babyface is in the chase. I blame Triple H for this. That dude grew up loving Ric Flair, but that heel into the territory thing is different from on national TV. First off, when the heel leaves the territory after, I'm going to change the word, screwing over the babyface, and that babyface is still, the main face, but the babyface is still the main face of the territory. He has his territory's heels to deal with, but he isn't overridden by the heel champion that screwed him being around every week constantly, screwing around with him and making him look dumb. Once national TV came into play, the proof is right there of how the constant babyface chase hurts the face. It's right there with Flair when you look at Sting and Luger. I love them, but they were never what they should have been because of this mentality. Meanwhile, your competition, the WWF at that time, got a top babyface and they manufactured heels to throw at them. There's heat, but in the end of the day, the babyface comes out on top the vast majority of the time. The heel chase is also a mentality that fucks WCW over once the NWO got hot and Goldberg too. But it's just frustrating because you get a little heat, you can just get a little heat, set up heels for your babyface and let them fucking win. What the fuck is so hard about that? And like Yor said, I can't say Yor, sorry. It's bad, isn't it? Or the heel said the heel can get his heat back with a mic, with actions against other lower card babyfaces too. If you've got a hot issue with a heel challenger coming up with a finish to prolong the issue. You could do your stick matches and things. And no one's saying we need a 4-year babyface title reign here. And then he apologises, it's a novel, but he got fired up listening. And it's like, that's the point. It's like, we've got away from, we book around the heels now, we don't book around the babyfaces, and it hurts the babyfaces in the long term, and we seem to think as long as they get their moment, it's okay. But it's difficult. And I think it's one of them things, because there's a tendency, I think, the shows are easy to watch at the moment, because they're using their top people in top spots, they're all interacting with each other. We always know that TV's better once their main people are interacting with each other, right?
They're good matches. People seem to be having fun. Like you said, the promo segments are good and not overwhelming. MJF has not been too much on these shows.
He's been on his best behaviour, yeah.
He's been on his, well, he's clearly, Jesus Christ, let's do another indie show. But I think that it's good wrestling TV. Like, it's good wrestling TV. And in some cases, it's not, I think part of it is it's not predictable booking, or the booking isn't going exactly where you think it is. There's twists and turns and stuff. I think people would have said maybe Andrade would have lost to Kenny or Swerve, and the fact that he beat both of them was kind of a shock. Like, I think there's a lot to like about the television right now. But I think that doesn't necessarily mean that some of these other larger structural problems are still not there. And I think that's a thing to point out. Like you're talking about with the baby faces, like, they have to do more to give them agency. They have to do more to lean on them. And that again will be a thing that separates them from WWE, that, the baby faces are leading the programs and we're not just waiting on chasing and doing 9 months of like, oh my God, for a 3-month title reign that we forget about, and then we put a heel on top again. Yeah,
it feels very much, you do that, it's very much like 2010s kind of WWE that you get to the thing.
It just minimizes the victory, like we talked about, it minimizes the victory that the babyface eventually gets.
But, it makes sense to put big matches back on TV. I think they can do that all year round. I think it helps their live attendance as well. There's lots of pricing things that they've done. But also, you look at this upcoming week in Sacramento, you've got a Kenny Omega Swerve Strickland match. Like, go look at last year's card in Sacramento, around the same time. You haven't got anything close to that. So you put big matches on TV, you get excitement. Obviously, they're chasing kind of ratings as well. Might jump to that actually kind of quickly. And we'll see how it works out for that in terms of the when they go to their pay-per-view schedule, because the pay-per-view schedule, you're going to go to the one a month come next month.
Yep.
It's not very far away. So then you're looking at that and seeing how they're done. So last time we talked about ratings, and we were kind of looking at going, and I think I said it in one comment saying, people were looking at these numbers and going, had they made a change? And the answer actually was yes. The answer was yes, right? So here's the thing, right?
It's so upsetting because there's no numbers. We love the numbers, and these numbers are not good numbers. And they're just confusing numbers, and I don't like them. The whole thing is just very upsetting.
The thing is, though, right, if you pull out the data and you actually look down into down demos and you look at that, and it's like there's no logic to any of it, and you're just going,
there's none of it.
You're just throwing shit at the wall, right? This is what we've been doing since September.
This is what's happening. Shit is being thrown at the wall. It's sliding down, and people are like, "What is it saying?" There's some message there. There's no message there. It's chunks of shit attached to a wall.
So at first they have this Dash survey, right? And this survey had its conclusions was that second room viewers. So say if you have a TV in the bedroom or something, or a TV in our kitchen as well as your living room, they weren't being counted in terms of cable viewership. So we had this drop in cable viewership overall, in terms of the kind of the pot, if you will, that was higher than it necessarily should have been. So they put them back in. Majority of them would have been over 50, because those are the people who...
With TVs.
Yeah, who aren't cutting the cord as much. Yeah.
Yep.
And then they also added in viewers who may not be as kind of represented in previous Nielsen kind of studies. So in terms of from demographics, Latino demographics, African American demographics, that sort of thing. So we saw this huge kind of the first week viewership jump, right? No demo jump, but huge viewership jump. But it's ridiculous over 50 numbers. And it wasn't just one company. It was across...
It was all of them.
It was all of them that were on cable. So it was SmackDown, it was, it was, I was going to say, it's not going to say, it was Dynamite, it was Collision, and it was TNA. TNA have probably been the biggest beneficiaries of this.
They never had a down period. They never had a shit rating. They went to... Basically, this took place right after their first episode.
So their first one. They went 0.04 to 0.03, and then they've jumped up now and they're at 0.005. Like, it's unheard of for a episode 4 or 5 to be higher than episode 1.
Right. So, and all of this is just due to the adjustment. Like, it's very... Listen, maybe the stunning fabulousness that is Mr. Elegance attracted so many who were just amazed by him and his farmer's tan.
Is he our show special little guy now?
He's mine. Listen,
he's your special little guy now.
I was showing a friend, I went out to dinner with a friend and I was showing him some photos of a very exciting thing that happened at work, and he was flipping through them and it had my photo of Mr. Elegance. And he was like, he looked at it, he was like, I'm sorry, like it was porn or something. And I was like, that's Mr. Elegance. He was like, I don't want to know. So anyway, whatever. It was but while it isn't, I was like, it's a wrestling thing, which the guy knows. He's like, regardless, it is certainly possible that TNA was one of the first television shows ever to gain an audience rather than lose it from its debut episode. Mm-hmm. Or it's possible that TNA was just the lucky beneficiary of them changing this fucking rating thing in a way that it made it look like, which, you know what, good for them. Let them catch a break. Okay?
Yeah, but let them catch a break. It's not just stopped there. So we had that. And then they did, it looked like... a few days later, they changed their kind of splits in terms of what's in the demo, which has been the major criticism of Nielsen, is that, the new big data plus panel format has basically screwed the 18 to 49 demo, 25 to 54, and the 18 to 34 demos. So they started fucking with them again. And it's like all of a sudden you get these huge jumps for pretty much all programming. Other than NXT, and NXT is the one that's least likely to be kind of affected, even though the CW are the biggest complaining about Big Data Plus panel, because they're on network. But for all the cable shows, you're seeing that you saw this huge uplift with the demos, and then you've got this weirdness about homes, the number of homes. You've got down demos that are completely batshit. And they're looking at more adjustments again in terms of cohabited kind of viewing and all that sort of thing. So this is not done yet. So I think John Pollock said, if you wrote to Nielsen with a formula and you kind of just said, here's this, they can, they probably accept it. Because you look at it, they're going to adapt it with this DASH study, but the DASH study isn't that many participants either. So
no, it's very small. And Andy Nemedy is the one who reported on this DASH study. Study, and he did a very good job of explaining it. And it's wonderful to have clarity in writing. Sometimes in wrestling you miss it. He just did a very nice job of laying the whole thing out and explaining what has been changed and how and why. But at the end of the day, we are still talking about 10,000 people are filling in for the population of the United States or whatever it is. Like, just fucking some crazy shit. Which, again, is not always bad when you're talking about, like, mathematics and statistics. Like, you can get some decent data out of that, but...
I think the problem is that nothing is comparable now at all.
No.
Right? So you can't compare really to last year. You can't even compare to 6 months ago. September doesn't compare to August. It's a fucking... And when, it's not just, obviously, for them. It's about the value of advertising, the value of their programming. It's essential for that. So these kind of big jumps in the demo will be really helpful in that regard. And for the long-standing part of wrestling TV, it will help with their rankings each week as well, because I expect that they will get a larger kind of jump back because they had the biggest damage, right? So they will probably get a higher kind of jump back up and go back to more similar where they were with the rankings and where they are current when they have been in the last few months. So that will be beneficial to wrestling TV. In terms of if you were trying to measure popularity, you can't measure fucking anything.
Nope.
There is nothing. You can't measure the down demos. You can't measure anything at this point.
Nope.
Because at least in the previous one, all right, you can say that it may not have reflected. We have no fucking idea. But what you could say is that you could follow trends and you could see differences from that data because you had a stable base. And now we have. You might as well. You can just chuck in the fucking air and see what lands, really. So that's where we are at the moment.
So you know what we get changes. To do? We get to make our assessments just based purely on our judgments and who we like and don't like, and we don't have to care about actual raw data anymore. It's like everybody's fucking dream, right? Everybody's dream. Like, or we'll be reduced to looking at ticket sales. The face I'm getting. We're just going on pure agendas now, Trish.
Excellent. Yeah, great. Talking of ticket sales, smooth segue. No, this is my segue. I'm going to do my segue.
No, it's a good ticket sale. Oh, this is good. No, talk about this. This is amazing. I'm so excited about this.
Which one do you want to talk about first?
I think we have
one or the WrestleMania one?
The WrestleMania one, because
okay, cool.
I want to look back to a time in September when people were suggesting that maybe John Cena's...
They laughed at us. I was talking about this with Brian Zellum at the Torch over the weekend. I was like, because he sent me it and he was like, real people remember. I was like, mate, they fucking laughed at us.
They laughed. Ha, ha, ha. What are you talking about? They're going to sell thousands of tickets whether John Cena is there or not. Guess what, motherfuckers? They're not selling thousands of motherfucking tickets to WrestleMania to the point where they're discounting them.
We're so close to a buy one get one free.
Ladies and gentlemen. So yeah, WrestleMania ticket sales have been in the absolute, well, not the absolute shitter, but they're low to the point where there are multiple reports of backstage panicking at WWE and reports that WrestleMania plans are being tossed in the air and completely rewritten 8 weeks away from the actual show itself, which is always what you want to hear when you're about to plunk down a bunch of money to fly to Las Vegas. And while the trip to Las Vegas and the whole situation may be cheap for some folks,
British
folks
people.
are like British. I was about to say Europeans, and they may be willing to go. There's also other people who are like not willing to eat. You're going to plunk all that money down for a card that you don't even know what the fuck it is yet, and that they're telling you they're going to change. Brock Lesnar versus LA Knight.
Stop it.
Listen, I don't engage with a lot of WWE fans in general, but I can just tell you from TikTok alone that man has a rabid fan base, not Brock Lesnar, LA Knight. They are not going to be happy about this.
What's his little catchphrase? Go, yeah.
Does he say yeah? He says yeah.
In a weird way, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, they all say things in a weird way. None of them talk like normal people.
They're caricatures, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that, listen, they're struggling right now. Struggling is a wrong word. They're doing better, but there's definitely big holes opening up. It just seems like there's a lack of casual fan interest. A lot of the places where I used to engage with people who were super into WWE back during the run are like not into it. Cody's, who the fuck knows who Cody is facing? Seems
Cody's
like they've just
done that to himself, though, isn't he?
Agreed.
So the story is that it would have been Roman and Seth.
Yep.
And Cody and whoever. And then Seth gets injured. Poor Seth. That's what he does. And then they go to Cody, Roman, Punk, and Bron Breakker. They were going to have Breakker in the Rumble. And then Cody... So they blame it on Drew, right? So Drew, and to be fair, Drew did need something. I don't think they built him up enough to be a heel win. No. They're making this interference guy. But, Cody basically dodges Roman. And there's a huge political game going on there for years. And then you end up with Roman and Punk, and now you don't work out what you're going to do with Cody and Drew and that sort of thing. And maybe Cody screwed himself. But, I look at it this way. So, yes, there are absolutely outside factors, right? We know that especially Canadian travel is massively down to the US. And to Las Vegas, right?
You shouldn't fucking come here. You should not come here. I can't like, I wouldn't. Why would you come here? You run the risk of just getting fucking jailed for no reason.
Well, especially,
I wouldn't do it.
And this is the thing. So WrestleMania in the past, especially when I used to go in the 2010s, was you'd find, for a lot majority of these WrestleManias, a lot more people coming in from outside the US than who went from the US. And maybe that was sometimes different when you went to like a New York one or somewhere like a big metropolis, because, that's where it was, you could find it much more difficult. The split was different because you had much more difficulty getting tickets. But in terms, especially when it comes to the other events, so your Raw, your SmackDown, your, what they call it now, WWE World, which replaced Access, those were traditionally kind of fodder for, fans from abroad or from out of town than they were for people who live in that city. And the whole point of what Vegas did in terms of bringing them back and paying them a huge amount of money to move it from New Orleans was because they want that outside tourism. So this is the thing about now where it's difficult, because you can say, okay, so we're cutting the price of tickets by 25% on offers, from Allegiant Stadium this weekend and that sort of thing. We're doing the 50-mile blackout similar to baseball games or whatever, and to block other establishments showing it, which is
you
kind of
can't
important.
show. No, just to clarify that, because I think that's an important thing to say. For those of you that haven't heard about this, WWE, whatever, they are blocking bars, restaurants, other places from showing WrestleMania on television within 50 miles of the stadium. So you can't go to a Dave & Buster's and watch WrestleMania. You can still watch it at home. They're not doing it, but that's a big piece. Like you said, there are a lot of people that would go see other shows, not necessarily have tickets for the show itself, and then go watch at a bar or something. And they're not doing that now.
No, and that used to be a key thing. So a lot of people come in for the independent shows, or for shows, like CML run shows, or New Japan used to run shows and that sort of thing. And that was their week, right? WrestleMania week was the biggest independent week of the year. Kind of feels weird saying that. I don't know what it is now. I don't know if it still is. I don't know. But that's the whole thing. And then, you might just watch WrestleMania in a bar, or you might watch it in your hotel or something like that, because you have a passing interest, but you're not WWE committed. You've come in for all these other things, but it's just like a finishing point of the week, right? Because it's the big show,
right?
The big stadium show. So, but if you're blocking that, then will someone stay the extra night? Until maybe they'll just go to the shows up to Saturday, independent shows, and then fly home, or they'll drive home, or and then it's that sort of thing. It's like, but the whole idea is to raise money for people coming into the city and staying there. It's not to get locals to buy tickets because we're going to block it. And that's the problem. So it might save the attendance numbers for WWE, but it's not actually going to have the economic impact that the city want when they're paying these site fees. And that's the important thing when they move forward.
They're paying the site fees, folks. Vegas doesn't want Vegas is paying them money for them to come, and they're not doing that for, them to be 18% behind the ticket sales from last year.
Well, I don't give a shit about the ticket sales. The ticket sales are not what bothers, the Vegas Tourist Board. They want people in the hotels. They want people to spend money in the restaurants, the casinos, wherever else, the attractions, all these things that are massively markedly down because travel to Vegas, internally US, Canada, everywhere else in the world, travel to the US and just in general is down massively because of what we talked about earlier.
And Vegas has taken a big hit because it's gotten way more expensive, and you can gamble anywhere nowadays.
Yeah, there's alternatives now, right? So that allure of that kind of Vegas thing at that prices is just people look elsewhere. And I actually think, I wonder, if them potentially running a stadium show in Cardiff in the UK in August, as much as it's to compete with All In, which is finally going on sale after Revolution, which probably tells you what's happening at Revolution. It's not hard, is it? But, they're putting that on sale there. But it's like, so then are we going to see something with WWE? Because if WWE do a stadium show, as much as it'd be about competing with AEW and, trying to restrict AEW's ticket sales at Wembley Stadium, you could also offer an alternative venue for people to travel to for a bigger WWE show this year. Is that more of an attraction because of, not wanting to go to the US for Europeans, not wanting to go, to a stadium show, especially if it's in the same location as the year before. So that'll be kind of interesting if they do run that, and I know a lot of people in the UK think they are going to run that, from who should know. So we'll see what gets announced in the next few weeks, because I think you've only got now a few weeks to do that, and they'll probably want that on sale as close to the all-in date as possible. On sale date as possible. So we'll see that. But you then creating an alternative stadium show. I think what people thought is because this is the last one before Saudi Mania next year, that it would encourage people to do that. But you've got stadium shows this summer. You know, you can go to 2 nights in Minneapolis, which I have no idea how they fill that building for 2 nights. Being that they couldn't, you know, basically Cleveland was only really a 1-night fill. I think that was like just around 40K. So to do 2 nights in that huge building in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, for SummerSlam, I mean, like, it's different for New York, right? You can get 50,000 for New York each night. It's like, this is fucking Minneapolis. But you've got alternatives.
We thought that it was going to be difficult for them to maintain this pace with these 2-night shows in some of these locations, and it seems like it's starting to bite them in the ass. Finally, like, it just seems like they don't have the creative, and
They don't. They have the same people on top. It's stagnant.
Right. It's nothing to get excited about, and folks don't want to pay these insane prices to go sit outside for night 1 of SummerSlam with 5 matches where Maxine Dupree, whatever. Maxine Dupree faces, you know, whoever. Or Becky Lynch, or, you know, Charlotte and Alexa finally have their...
I don't know.
I'm being very mean.
Yeah, it is what it is, but it's a reflection of lots of other factors, but it's also a reflection of their business not being as hot, which everything's pointed to. And, you know, you have that stagnant top for too long. If you don't elevate people in that period, you know what happens. So that's where they are, yeah. But I do wonder how having a European stadium show, if that will change to kind of draw for that, because of not as many people wanting to travel to the US for WrestleMania this year as well. Because I don't think that's just a North American problem.
No.
Because in the past, you know, we've seen 40-50% coming from outside North America. That's, you know, so... especially the ones that are going to stay for longer periods, you know, who are going to spend money. If you're coming from abroad, you're more likely to spend higher amounts as well. So, yeah, I think that's all a big part of it. But the story really is the biggest part of their financial kind of security outside of the Saudi deal is, in terms of live events, it's being able to generate these site fees.
Yep.
And how much kind of the performance of these sort of things will will impact that in the future. That's why they lined up so many, and now we'll see what the results are and what they can do in the future now, because it will impact them. And that's where the pressure will come onto creative and other parts of it, because it will not get blamed just on financial things. That's not how a company like TKO works. So
Nope.
Nope.
No, it will not.
So, just got a couple other topics to kind of jump through before we get to our serious stuff at the end, which we've left at the end because we always do that, don't we? We do it because it gives you a choice over it. So, just want to answer one thing from the last podcast. So, this is around Tommaso Ciampa. So,
good old chompers.
Look, guys. I am allowed to not like his input. His input in Ring of Honor and in NXT. It's okay. It's not going to kill anybody. He had a good day. What? No, I'm not.
You have to love him.
I had to sit through Cornette fucking run Ring of Honor, okay? I didn't say what I fucking want. I sat through that shit. Not many people did, okay? And I sat for NXT. It's fine. It's not going to kill you. He had a good debut in AEW. And, yeah, he's done well wrestling-wise. I think people have enjoyed his work. What have you thought? So obviously you're not someone that's really seen much of him before AEW.
I think he's been fine. Like, I think it's, you know, again, part of why the TV is good. He shows up, he gives a good match. I'm not gonna say he gives a decent match. That's mean-spirited. He gives a good match. He's happy to be there. It's like somebody fresh and new in their mid-card scene. It was weird booking, but I guess I understand why they didn't want to go Kyle Mark again, threw somebody in there for a couple weeks. You know, it was a nice way to debut someone, to have them come in and win a belt. It's not something AEW traditionally does. But I can't say that I'm not someone who's completely won over by a good entrance and good matches. Like,
I did like how everyone kept saying top presentation, and you just said, yes, It's a man with a coat. And I just
he has a coat, folks. I think the problem is that once you see that they just all have coats, you can't never not see the coats. And so it's like, he has a jacket, and the jacket has got floppy collar, and I don't know, it just seems like it's a little too big for him. But whatever. Like, the song is really good. I'm excited that you guys, I'm excited that people are excited. I'm not unexcited. Yeah. It's fine. Like, it is what it is. Like, my preferences run to something a little bit different, and that's fine. He's had I've really enjoyed the wrestling.
Yeah. He's been very, very good. Yeah,
he's been good at the wrestling, and it's something new. So
yeah,
but it's just a coat.
We did get a comment on Blue Sky from Right Said Nick that said one bone of contention with the last episode was the complaint about putting ex-WWE folk over in AEW while also complaining of WWE not using ex-AEW talent well. Surely what AEW are doing is sending a message to WWE talent. And while I can agree to a certain point, I think what maybe didn't get across, or I didn't definitely get across as close last time, is that it's not all about like this, we don't need anybody else in WWE, right? It's about the balance. And
yes,
they at times have not got the balance right. And I know our friend Harrison thinks I have TNA PTSD because of, around this. And I keep telling you, I know I have 20, 21, 22 AEW PTSD. Because that was the period where they got the balance completely wrong in the end. And then it hurt them. And by, July the following year in August, they're way down before, from the year before. Yep. And how are you way down when you have Adam Cole, when you have Bryan Danielson, when you have CM Punk, when you have whoever else you brought in the roster, and there is many of them. But our point is, in terms of the way that WWE use ex-AEW talent compared to how AEW use ex-WWE talent, is that if you take the list, right? So the list of people that have come in since 2020. So Adam Copeland, Saraya, Miro, Malachi Black, CM Punk, The Hardys, FTR, Adam Cole and Undisputed Era, Buddy Matthews, Claudio, Christian, Paul White, Andrade, Mark Henry, Ruby Soho, Ryan Danielson, Samoa Joe, William Regal, Mercedes Moné, Hurt Syndicate, Ricochet, Tony Storm, and Swerve Strickland. Is there any single one of them that hasn't been pushed, at a top level? Who hasn't come in and been given, signature spots? Who hasn't been come in and been presented on the top of AEW, have been put over by AEW talent? This is the thing. So it's like, if you are going from WWE to AEW, you are going to get pushed. And you are going to get pushed at a decent level. Perhaps over what you should be, in some cases. And that's the difference. You don't know that if you're going to a WWE. There's not much evidence that you are.
Nope.
So
Hobbs has not been seen on television. He has been on Main Event.
Oh, I think I don't know if that was just dark match. I believe it was just a dark match, but it's the same thing, right?
It's the same thing.
You debuted in the Rumble and you didn't do anything else with him.
Nope.
So that's not saying to people that if I go there, we're going to get that immediate push, is it? So you're not seeing that. But when you look at the names of people that come in, every single one of them has had significant push from the time they came in. All right, some of them maybe didn't work out. Some of them run ourselves. Like Malachi Black. Yeah, you don't like losing. Miro can't be bothered to lose a Battle Royal to Hangman Page at Grand Slam in 23. Sorry, guys. Off we go. Adam Cole obviously had his injury troubles, but first 8-9 months was all over that show continuously.
Yep.
Way more than he would have done if he'd gone to main roster in WWE. Adam Copeland, well, we know about that one. Saraya,
I'm not saying anything.
I just make it into the time of some. He runs to the left. And it's a step to the right. Like that, right? No, sorry, I can't remember. And he puts his hand,
Yeah, I'm doing it myself now.
Yeah.
He points at the pie. All right, we're going to get DCMA'd.
But you know what I mean? So it's like when you
He's going to be back soon, too.
Oh, I've got a joke about that in a minute. You ruined my joke.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. But Hurt Syndicate, Ruby Soho, you remember when that happened with obviously the outpouring about Chris Stanley? And you look at Double Nothing 2022, that was the height of that, and that obviously led into the MJF promo that made the company a heel and all that stuff, right? So it was that was the height of that point, but it's that's the point. The point is, if you are coming from there, you know that you're going to get pushed. It's an attraction to them, yes. Is at times an over-attraction and it hurts, the views of their own talent, yes. But that's a balance that you have to make. If you get the balance wrong, then you're in trouble. If you get the balance right, then you can do well out of it. And then, I was talking to someone the other day and they were like, I don't know what you're whining about, what's going to happen? It's they'll have Paige lose to MJF and then AJ Styles will turn up to close the show and then they'll have the Bucks lose to FDR and have Cope and Christian come back and I was like, go fuck yourself.
I mean, maybe that won't happen, but you could see it.
See it. Exactly.
You could see it. It's not outside the realm of possibility.
But no, that's the point, right? It's just, yeah, it's about that balance and getting that balance right. So yeah, Ciampa's come in and he's done well. And, you know, I know like, people want to take their victory. That's great. Like, I don't have to like what he did previously. You can live with it. It's okay. But it's like, there are people that can come in and be part of it, but it's just about the balance and getting the balance right. And that's why we kind of make the jokes out of it. Quick little bit on New Japan and talent moves before we move on to the last one. So
They're fleeing.
Well, no. It's no
joking.
different.
I'm teasing.
It's no different to what we have been. So they did a New Beginning show in Osaka, which was a sold-out show. I think they sold 5 more tickets than they did last year for a sold-out show, which I guess you do that, right? You just I'm going to put an extra 5 seats in from sold-out show to sold-out show. But with Jake Lee and Yota Tsuji in the main event. Jake Lee was actually really good on this tour. He's so frustrating because they had a great dynamic. You know, obviously they had a good heat from it. They did some good setup stuff with him destroying members of Unbound Company, and then he comes into the match and he tries to be Azawa to me. I'm just going to play the clown, and then you get the Jake Lee that everyone hates, and you get all the criticism for. But it's so funny because it's such a similar setup to what they did with Kenta. When he was the leader of Bullet Club with the Naito thing in 2020. It's like a carbon copy. And the way the Osaka match worked was pretty much carbon copy as well, other than that Yota Tsuji didn't end up with accidental blood everywhere pouring down his face like Naito did. If you ever go back and watch that match, it's like, I don't think Naito could even see, right? The blood's like just gushing and he's just like, woo! And he's even more woo now, like he's lost in the ring, like, and they won't protect him like they do in New Japan, there's no Hiromu to bail him out. But it's like, Jesus Christ. But that's what they did with that. They did the change of Aaron Wolf, where they basically kind of took the belt off him very, very quickly, put on Ren Narita. They still are invested in House of Torture. I know how everyone else feels. It's funny because I thought they were either going to do one or the other, right? They were either going to do the Jake Lee thing and have Tsuji chase for the cup and come back at Genesis, or they were going to do the Aaron Wolf change. And, they've got a TVSRC now, a primetime date for Dominion, so I imagine you're going to have a big Aaron Wolf win there. That's how they're going to work that there. It takes pressure off him in terms of he can do more of the multi-mans. I imagine he'll be knocked out of the cup quickly, and you kind of get the experience that way. But it's difficult when you're watching from the outside to think, why on earth have they done that? This guy's obviously got huge interest in Japan. Like, what are you doing? But for them, they're thinking that more than likely is that, they have him probably interested to casuals for the big shows, not so much of anything else, and to kind of keep him out the eye in some ways to get him out. How that works, we'll see. It's a difficult one. He's still work in progress. Rest of the show is fine. I feel the tag division is huge at the moment. It's probably the bright spot. Knockout Brothers are continuing their kind of big run of being kind of very over and having great matches. This one with Shota Umino and Yuri Uemura. People probably won't have heard that Shota is very good at putting tag matches together and highlighting people. But they're just doing a good job with them. And even with some of this, it does feel fresh and it is unpredictable. And it's just about how they carry that now into the rest of the year, and especially financially, because the reason why you end up with so many people leaving and this sort of thing, and they were prepared for it this year, that's why everyone was kind of shoved in Unbound Company where we'll sort the contract situations out. It's that financially they may have got a decent amount of money from the Tanahashi retirement, but they are still at a point financially where they make a couple $1 million a year profit. Yeah. It's not a situation where they can chuck big contracts at people. They are still a live event business. I read a really good article actually in Japan Pro Wrestling Today around the comparisons to Nippon Baseball, where you've seen a huge influx of players from that league into MLB in the last few years, and how Nippon Baseball's had to relook at itself as sort of a feeder program for America, and actually there not being any shame in that, and how Japanese wrestling may have to look at that as an alternative as well, because they cannot compete salary-wise. They can't even get close. There was some you look at someone like David Finlay, right? If he could get a decent salary, even close to what you'd get in the US, and a long-standing contract, like similar to what Callum Newman's got, that multi-year deal is real, and it's like he may have stayed, probably would have stayed, but he can't. And then all of a sudden you've got 2 potential offers for David Finlay, right? So originally the offer was for NXT from WWE, I believe it may still be, and then an AEW offer, which we didn't see in previous years. There wasn't that kind of previous interest in David Finlay that there is now. So all of a sudden you've got these competing offers. And you know as well, it's the same with the Hobbs thing, right? As soon as you've got competing offers, the value raises. And that takes New Japan out of the equation. Hiromu, that was a shocker. I talked about Hiromu in the last one, and I think you'll spend more time in Noah and still do some New Japan, because that was a plan that was kind of made clear to everybody at the start of the year. And then it looks like somebody else has come in. And he does, as soon as they announce he's leaving, he does an interview and he talks about the age that he is the same age as when Nakamura left for the US, when Okada left for the US. And it made it quite clear where he was going. It became less speculation and more sourced. I believe, from the same person that told us NXT for David Finlay like a month and a bit ago, as a WWE offer, I believe that if Hiromu goes to WWE, he will start with NXT as well. Which is not that uncommon for Japanese wrestlers in terms of because of relocation and that sort of thing as well. So it's not the slight that you think it is, but I just think, God, Hiromu, he's going to get Tozawa and I'm going to be upset.
I was going to say, I don't think it's a slight from the NXT side. It seems much more likely he'll get a really racist gimmick.
Or they just don't care. I don't know. He is, I've said it for a long time, his English has been very good for a while. He's been learning English for a while. You can have quite a decent conversation with him to a high level. And that always makes him, someone that they could potentially look at. And they'll look at, they've ran Inamura on excursion over there to a degree of success. And so it probably had their eye on him. I probably think he got picked up from Forbidden Door, to be honest.
Yeah.
But that's definitely a shocker. And, but for him, it's like, you look at the money that he will earn potentially if he gets like a full WWE deal with like an NXT start, and it's so much compared to juniors. We talked about it last year when they were looking at potentially moving him up before the Naito thing came about, and it's so much more money. Like juniors are paid so little, even compared to the heavyweight competitors. Never mind what they'd be paid in the US. So you can see the kind of thinking behind it. But I do think that there needs to be a change in how New Japan and probably other companies in Japan kind of look at talent contracts. And I don't know if that means more produce shows. They look at, because they're destination shows, they're actually sometimes more successful than the regular, like especially Korakuen Hall shows. Whether it's something about, what Naito did where you give the wrestler more ownership over their own merch. So it's less money into the company, but you're more able to offer that as part of the financial incentive to keep said wrestlers. I don't know, but you need to change the approach. Otherwise, you will become this kind of Nippon baseball style thing where everyone's just kind of waiting for these people to leave. And I don't know how healthy that is for the ecosystem in full. Joel and Maloney staying. He had every intention from last month to stay. Obviously announced that this week. And I believe Gabe Kidd is staying, but will be dual contracted. Obviously it looks like he's taking a break now. People making a lot of, he's not in the kind of posters for shows coming up and that sort of thing. He's not in New Japan Cup. But I believe that he will be staying on dual, and that's an interesting one. We'll keep an eye on how that kind of works out. But yeah, it's something they prepare for. They've got pretty much cards worked out until Dominion. I don't think Andrade's winning the Global. Let's see about that one. I reckon he's losing to Yota Tsuji, because Tsuji has said, I'm defending this one here and this one there. So I don't see the point in him leaving soon. I wonder if that's part of them not kind of diverting from plans with the AEW title picture, but we'll see. That show's in Trenton next week. Right, that's enough of me rambling about New Japan. Should we do the last bit?
Yeah, let's talk about this.
Let's just get it done.
I'll start with this. So we didn't discuss it when it happened, but and obviously there's going to be trigger warnings for sexual assault and stuff like that, which we're going to talk fairly frankly about, not too graphically, but as frankly as we discuss anything. But AEW did a Dynamite in Orlando, and before the show aired, Marty Scurll posted a picture of himself and Hangman outside of a Cracker Barrel. Marty Scurll has been essentially persona non grata in wrestling. And, we'll get into the details, but essentially during speaking out, a woman, as I would say, alleged that Marty Scurll attempted to have sex with her. She was 16 and he was 26, and she was very intoxicated. Essentially, he was basically someone who was like, we're all set. We don't need you in wrestling anymore. It's not acceptable behavior, and we're not It's not something we're willing to do. So a lot of people were very upset that Hangman was still speaking to Marty Scurll, was willing to be seen with him. A lot of Hangman fans were kind of upset about this. And a week later, I think it was the Tuesday, Hangman did an interview with John Alba of the Takedown on Sports Illustrated, where he sort of explained, I don't know if he explained why, but he essentially, to the long story short, well, we're going to get into more detail. Essentially, was like, this is what. Yes, I saw Marty Scurll. I still see Marty Scurll. This is why it's fine. If he was sort of apologetic for it, but also was like, if this upsets you, that's justified. You're okay to be upset with me. It was kind of interesting because I think in one of the things that we've talked about at the top of the show was how many people seemed more upset that Hangman talked about it than anything else. And it does seem like, from my perspective in wrestling, there's this element of you should never discuss a thing where you fucked something up. Like, you just don't talk about it, like never discuss it and it'll go away. And that was something that I anyway, that's a side note, whatever. This kind of sucked. I mean, I think for those of us that follow wrestling deeply, none of us are surprised. I think, you've seen Instagram interactions between Marty Scurll and other people. You know that there are still people in wrestling who are friendly with him, who do talk to him, who interact with him. I don't want to say it's like a secret per se, but I don't think it's something that a lot of people want to advertise from the rooftops. I think it's worth pointing out that Marty Scurll did not really take ownership of what happened. And he certainly has not been someone who has attempted to try and apologize or make things better, since the allegation came out. The whole thing just sucks. I don't know a way to describe it. You'd like to think that but it's also not, to me, it's also not a black and white issue either. I don't know. I don't want to say I've struggled with it, but I think it's a little bit more complicated than it first appears. And I at least respect Hangman for being willing to come out and say, yeah, I did this. You saw that. Because there were some people that were like, it was an AI picture, which is just, no, it was not an AI photograph. He's like, yeah, no, I see this guy. I still see him. I still talk to him. And, I'm not going to apologize for it, but I'm also not going to expect you to be okay with it. I thought there were a lot of people that shit on that, but I also felt like that was kind of I thought it was an adult way of taking responsibility for it, but that's my perspective. And I might have felt differently. I might have felt very differently with somebody I disliked. So I don't know. I think it's one of those things where you want wrestling to be better and you want wrestling to do more, but at the same time, relationships and interactions between people are so rarely black and white that it's hard to say, if someone said to me tomorrow, Trish did this terrible thing, like, I don't know that I would never speak to you again. I just don't know that I would. I'd have to, like, every situation is unique and every individual thing is unique. And I don't know that I'd want somebody judging me on that, but I don't know. Trish.
Yeah, it's a difficult topic because, if you try and bring any nuance to discussion or any kind of context, you're immediately seen as defending something, and that's kind of putting people off discussion, right? And I think that's something why we haven't seen much discussion amongst journalists, let alone anybody else.
Right.
I think, Dave wrote about it in The Observer, but hadn't discussed it on any audio. I think the only kind of audio where I've heard an actual discussion on it was Post.
Yes, which was a good conversation. I thought they tackled it and the nuances of it really well.
Yeah, and the thing about this, so just to make some of the details kind of a bit clearer. So the alleged victim came to Twitter during the Speaking Out movement in 2020 and basically said that she had an encounter with Marty Scurll in 2015 at a after party for an IPW show, which was a company that ran in southeast England for 15 years. I think they started in 2002, around the start, just after Millennium, if I remember rightly. And she was incredibly drunk at this event because she was being given drinks by the promoter of that company, Daniel Edler, who is also a disgraced name from speaking out. That situation is also something that came up the Paul Robinson allegations from the Swords of Essex was the same thing. The promoter Edler had given a 16-year-old a number of kind of alcoholic drinks and was responsible for them being intoxicated, which tells you a little bit about the culture in general that we're talking about here. So she said that she was incredibly drunk. She was 16 years old. She bumped into Scurll outside of the venue. He kind of propositioned her. Her friend didn't want her to go, so wouldn't allow her the hotel key. They went back to the hotel. He asked her to perform oral sex, and then her story is that he wanted to penetrate her, and she said, "I'm a virgin, please don't." And then the friend came along and broke everything up, and then he didn't turn around the next day. He didn't come into the venue to wrestle the match the next day. That's her story. She was 16 at the time. She was intoxicated. Scurll, let's just make this one clear. Scurll was not the one intoxicating her, because I keep seeing that places.
Yes.
It was the promoter, which again is a thing. And this is where it's kind of hard for me, because I know what this culture looks like. And I don't know what this culture looks like because I was involved in anything or anything like that. I know what this culture looks like because I wanted to learn from different wrestlers. And sometimes we'd just be there in terms of it happening in a hotel, and we'd be at the hotel. And actually, I want to sit and ask Tracy Smothers' question for an hour. It's so stupid, isn't it? Because I was such a naive kind of 18-year-old. You'd see things that you didn't really know. And that's half the problem. And I've been through this so many times in British wrestling, and especially during speaking out. There are so many things that you kind of know something's not right, but you can't be sure. And it's hard because what can you do? And you're left feeling with that trapped feeling, and it felt like with that. So it is hard for me to kind of talk about that, but that's what her story was. Allegations that she put out there. Scurll came out with 2 statements, and the first one basically said he believed that they had a consensual sexual encounter. Because they're at the bar, he didn't question her age, because obviously drinking age in the UK is 18. So you shouldn't be in a bar at 16. That's not uncommon though. And he called it basically his ignorance that allowed for the encounter to happen. He said he did not become aware of her age until after the encounter. Although he knows that the age disparity is not kind of, the way that it's looked, or the reality of it isn't going to be looked at in a great manner. And he points out that the encounter was technically legal in the UK, but it was his lack of good judgment, and then goes on to kind of say that the culture needs to change. The alleged victim came back and said that he was fully aware of her age because he had trained her as part when she was at the Rev Pro Academy, which had just started quite recently after there. That was the academy that was in Portsmouth, I believe. And there was no other kind of comment back from Scurll from that point. There was investigation completed by Ring of Honor, because Scurll was he was going to assume the promotion's head booker title.
Yep.
And he was released from Ring of Honor in January of 2021, having been removed from the roster in September 2021, and they've made quite clear that they weren't going to use him again at that point. The only major promotion that attempted to bring him in after that was New Japan, where he'd filmed some stuff for New Japan Strong, and it got out, and there was so much backlash that people kind of in New Japan decided it wasn't worth it and dropped it from the taping. I think that there are some really serious issues here that if anyone just bothers to even try and discuss them, they'll kind of get taken over by what people believe or want to believe or don't believe or that sort of thing. So the only things that I want to talk about here in terms of this is that I think there is an issue about who's rehabbed and who's not. And that also plays into wrestlers' decisions to keep relationships and not. Because remember we talked about the Vince McMahon stuff, and we talked about the weird loyalty factor. And we talked about why Bryan Danielson could say something like, I still love him, even though he's made mistakes, or John Cena could go to dinner and that sort of thing, or everyone could go to Vince McMahon, because they have that weird loyalty, right? But that weird loyalty can also be like a wrestler thing, because they look at it as in, this person looked after me at this point, or, right. This person did this, this person did that, and now, their whole life's changing, but I watch these other people that have done this, or thinking maybe significantly worse, and they're rehabilitated by being employed, because your ability to be rehabilitated by being employed comes not from what you've actually done, but what your value is in the business. The same as it will in UFC, where they're going to use Conor McGregor, right?
Sure. You see that with Ric Flair, right?
Yes.
Like Ric Flair is all over television still, and I think, again, this is one allegation, but I don't think you can look at the totality of Ric Flair's.
Well, there's way more than one. But
right.
it's not just
Stone Cold Steve Austin is another one. He's gonna, if he showed up at WrestleMania this year, people will go absolutely apeshit for him, right?
Yeah,
like it's
that's the thing, isn't it? Right, and even if you want to look at someone that's sort of successful rehabilitation. There's a producer trainer in one of the major companies that has allegations of sexual assault from the Play Ride for Hell from a separate lawsuit that got settled out of court that no one really knows of, and domestic violence allegations.
Yep.
And now works with women predominantly, and is seen as as a mentor for a lot of key people on that roster, and is seen as someone who has successfully rehabilitated. So it's a hard topic to say who should be rehabilitated and who shouldn't. And in this case, you can look at it. I'll say the thing that nobody else wants to say. I know that there are a lot of people in the industry that are still close to Marty because they don't believe the account.
Oh, yeah.
And no one else wants to say that, so I'll say it. And that's their justification for it because, it's one of them things. This has become incredibly tribal. But you have to understand a few things when it comes to wrestling. And this is what Dave was trying to get across. And maybe he didn't word it as well as he wanted to. And maybe I won't. But it's like... It's one of those things where there are people in every single company that are still acquaintance with him. Okay? There are people in every company who are acquainted with someone that if you knew the detail of or you knew who it was, you would probably look down upon them. And that's a cultural problem because when you look at it, this culture enabled something like this to happen, or if you want to look at that, enabled, for him to, act in sexual misconduct with a 16-year-old girl, the things that allow that to happen is because of the way that wrestling's been structured. And that's not to defend anybody, it's not to take anything away from the decisions that people have made. Let's be really clear on that. But this culture has been passed down for generations, and this happened in the UK as well. And it's like, it didn't just come from Daniel Edler and Alex Shane. Like, this has been going on for decades. I remember, when we had Andy Kilden on the show last year, and he challenged me because I said, what are you doing about speaking out? But I also mentioned that we do, the wrestlers' reunions, right, for World of Sport and that sort of thing. And he said, the people in that generation, that's even worse because that's a generation that this behaviour comes from. It's learned. Yep. They learn when they go in. You'll learn, what's your expectation of you? In fact, there is an expectation on male talent that has been, it was in that environment to be like this and to do these sort of things. And it's ridiculous, but it's like they've created this environment where we think these things are acceptable. And the only way you can break that is to make people accountable. But then when people make themselves accountable, you have to, you also have to look at them making themselves accountable rather than you just doing it. It's hard.
You end up in that situation too in which, and again, I'm not saying this is what is acceptable or anything else, but you can also be in a situation where part of this is like the way that men and women are socialized with each other and the way that society allows men to view women as sexual objects, right?
And that whole culture is that.
Every woman wants to have sex with me, so you can't envision a woman not wanting to have sex with you. So of course it was consensual because why would she be here if she doesn't want to fuck me, right? And if your best defense is it's legal when you're talking about an absolutely blackout drunk 16-year-old, you have a problem. Like that's not normal. Like that's not okay. And if you think that's okay, that's kind of fucked up. Like,
and we've told these people, they've told these people that it's okay.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm not taking direction away from them. Like, they've made these decisions. But this culture has also taught them that this is okay. And it's for generations this has been going on. They've been telling people it's okay. And I remember, when I was that age and I was around it, and I would start to dress more like I do now, I wouldn't wear anything that I'd wear when I was working rock shows or anything like that. I'd be like, I just wear a sports shirt and something like that. And I remember talking to Larry Sharp for a long time at a show in New Jersey, and he said, God, I could just take you to anything because people just think you're my granddaughter sort of thing. And I was like, you don't even realise you're doing it. I didn't realise I was doing it. But I was doing it to protect yourself because you don't want to be seen in that way that people view people. Because that was how people viewed people in that period. If you went to anything around wrestling, you were a woman in the UK, that they either, you're either that or you're someone to use to make yourself look, like you weren't, I was going to say scumbag, but I'm sorry, that you weren't a scumbag. And I've experienced that many times now. And it's like one of those things where you wonder, why are you still involved with this? Because, having been like used for someone to give their backstory out that was named in Speaking Out, just out of fucking nowhere, so they could have like an alibi and that, or haven't been used for I don't know what you have. We have criminal database checks that you have before you start working that. But if you have someone like that, then you can run certain venues, all these sort of things to legitimize these people, haven't been used in that way. And then look, I know that this is the thing about advocating for people, or you know, people that you want to. And this is what we talked about at the start of the show, right? People want to find people that align with their views, and they want them to be perfect because they want to believe in that and have someone that they can associate with, right? Here's the problem. Like, if you've been around pro wrestling for a while, or even for a short period of time, you'll know that none of those people exist, especially if you want to go by association, right? So I'm left with, I have to do, and this is where something he said, like, occurred to me, and I thought, shit, I do the same thing sometimes in terms of, you go off how people behave with you, how they behave towards their peers, and how they behave with people around them, like fans and that sort of thing. Because what else fucking else have we got to go off? Like, it's really, really difficult in that sense, because if I was to, like, put myself and think, I'm going to base this on how they, you know, other associations that people have, I wouldn't fucking watch wrestling. Because there isn't a person in that top, you know, in any of those top companies that doesn't have an association with someone that you would frown upon if you know about it. And that makes it difficult. So in terms of Paige, you know, he knew the risk. He knew that by continuing this relationship, and, you know, he says, you know, the way that he phrased it was around, you know, this guy's lost his career and I wanted to check in on him, and it's kind of been constant from there. But you knew the risk. You knew that, you know, especially with the way people see your character.
Well, let's
and they
face
see
it,
that your moral stance in terms of, you know, your advocacy.
It's part of his brand.
Yeah, it is part of your brand. It's part of your brand for your advocacy for, you know, especially for women's wrestling in recent years, or your advocacy against political issues, or rights for different demographics, you know, underrepresented in so many ways. So it's part of your brand. So you know, as a wrestler, and this is the thing, right? So you know, as a person, you can make your own decisions. And look, I don't know what decision I would make, because, and I've been reading, the thing that's touched me the most, and I'm not into like all the kind of vitriol or anything like that, but is reading people that have said, I've been in this situation and this is a choice I've made, or I've been in this situation and this is a choice I've made. And sometimes they're very, very different, because you don't know until you're in these situations. You don't. So I'm not, and this is, I think John Paul said, and I'm of the same thing, I can't judge somebody off that because I don't know. But you know that when you put yourself out there, and especially when you advocate for something, you put that target on your back. And whether you think, you know, you hold yourself up and you kind of hold yourself accountable and you try and be honest about it, but actually you will hurt yourself more, because people are much willing to wipe things by the wayside when they don't know. You know, it's a difficult one. I agree with you. Like, you've made yourself accountable, and then people can think about it whatever way they wish. And, you know, most people wouldn't have done that. But there is going to be that sort of, because they view you in that way. And once you put yourself, you know, and you illustrate your viewpoints and you advocate for change, then you have to be fucking perfect. Yeah. You can't fuck up. And because that's how they view you, and especially when you have a younger demographic audience, let's be
Women
honest.
especially.
Yeah.
Because the problem is in a lot of these things, it's like, okay, I felt bad, he lost everything, but did you think about her at all? Like, she lost stuff, you know? Like, you know, she lost stuff before you even knew she existed. How many women don't go into wrestling, or how many women got run out of wrestling because they had to deal with some guy grabbing them or touching them or raping them or trying to get them shit-faced, or even just making a fucking comment? I mean, every woman who has listened to this podcast has heard a comment, right? Whether it was in your career, whether it was in high school, whatever. So, like, on the one hand, like, this is where I veer wildly back and forth on this. I have no straight, structured feeling. On the one hand, I'm like, you know what? You know, he didn't do anything wrong. He's allowed to associate with who he wants to. I appreciated that he stood up and spoke about it and said this, but it's also like, you know, you're concerned about him, and it's again, society, we're not concerned about the victim, and you say, yeah, he doesn't know the victim, he knows this guy. Okay, it's, I don't know, that's one of those things where it just, that's the one that I keep coming back to that just busts my freaking, every time I think, oh, I've come to a place of contention with this. But I also think, like, as you said, this is wrestling, and I also think that the idea that it has to be a better place. We have to hold it to a better standard, but that is going to be very difficult to do if what proportion of people who are from the older generation that are everybody these guys have all been taught to revere and everything else, like you said, they're done worse and they're still walking around making money off of it.
Yeah, and that's where the guilt factor comes in, because people feel guilty.
It doesn't seem fair.
That it's not fair. And then they feel responsible as well because people have looked after them. There's a weird loyalty to it. It's the same thing we talked about with the Vince stuff, right? With the way that Danielson talked about it and the way that, Cena talked about it, and Becky and Orton and other people. And that is something that gets brought up by wrestlers. Why is he getting so much vitriol compared to these people? And one, it's because he's advocating. And, even if he's not advocating in terms of like wearing it in the character, it's funny because people say the character is like an asshole at times. The character has no friends. The character isolates himself. He does all these different things. It's a struggle, right? That's the character. But they think they know the real person. And you have to be careful of that, because as I said, like, I think for me, it's like, it's important that people realize that they can feel different things about this. Not everybody has to feel the same. I think that's what's driving me crazy, is everyone thinks everyone needs to feel this, or needs to feel this emotion about it. No, you will feel different emotions about it, and that's okay. You have different thoughts about it, and okay, it may be respected, it may be part of your real life experience that drives how you feel about something. But it's a difficult one because of all the other context, and it's a difficult one because of how that character has been branded. And maybe that changes. Maybe you feel differently in 6 months, maybe you feel differently in 12 months, and then maybe you reassess how you look at wrestling. I don't know. But I would be very careful about just picking a replacement person to throw everything behind and believe that they're going to represent every single one of your values. Because, we're going to see next month there's going to be a lot of praise for a wrestler in terms of their impact of women's wrestling. And you don't have to look too bad in the distant past to see other things that maybe you don't want to see. So, and it's the same with loads. There'll be loads, there's every one of them. I think that's the thing that I got most frustrated about, was them seeing people going, yeah, but I love this guy and he's fine because he's perfect. Yeah. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, people
I think it's difficult because anybody that's going to advocate from this generation is going to have flaws in terms of association at the least. So it's also that thing of, do you want people in that industry to stand up for change when none of them are going to be squeaky clean? And that's also difficult, because otherwise, what voices do we have? It's so complex, and there's so many issues in terms of rehabilitation, in terms of advocacy, in terms of association, in terms of the way that the industry will pick and choose depending on value. We talked about Flair earlier. It's a prime example of one. I think other people got fired after the plane ride from hell. He was Evolution, right?
Yep.
But there's so many complex issues in it, and everyone wants to just slide it down into something that's so simple. When it's difficult, because then you look at someone like Paige and you look at his reputation amongst his peers, and it's like, what do you do? And that's probably for him, long term, he'll stay the same guy and you'll hear the same things from people about him. But yeah, it's an individual judgment. I think that's the biggest thing. And the reason you won't see any debate about it is because if anyone posts any different opinion on anything about this, any little slight detail, then you've got someone running in from the other side bashing them over the head, which is not healthy when we're discussing something that's so serious and so kind of individual viewpoint. You all feel how you feel about it. And
there's nothing worse than trying to have a serious conversation about it and deal with there's, as you said, and people running in and being like, it's a pedophile, and it's just like, guys, can we not, what are we doing here? But I also think that's part of the problem, is these are not topics you can have deep, intense conversations on in 180. People want to do sound bites and they're dead to me forever and all this other stuff. And God knows I'm guilty of that myself at times. So,
but we also, I think there's an age thing to that as well. I think when you're younger, and the way that people are kind of brought up now is to be more kind of instinctive, right? So you have to feel these intense emotions about everything all the time. And I think that kind of goes away as you get older and you have more life experience and you experience things that you maybe never thought you would at 18, 20 years old.
Right.
But yeah, it's I said, it's difficult for me because I saw so much of that culture. And I know how many people are still interacting with whoever. And I have to judge myself, why am I still involved with certain things? Because even though I know the people there aren't, under any sort of allegations, there will be some people, you know, when we do the reunions, there will be some people there that were involved in things, or saw things, or allowed things to happen, because of how widespread that culture it was, and in some places still is.
Right.
Just not lie about it. But that's the choices that I make. You know, I have to make the choice. You know, we make the choices all the time about what we consume. You know, we make the choices whether that be politically. I know, you know, in the US you had the thing with like Target this year and that sort of thing. We make those choices probably far more than ever because of the environment that we're living in. We're more understanding of, you know, how brands and, you know, whenever individual companies can be part of our lives, but also like whether we want them to be. Whether that be by political association or them sort of things, or, you know, conduct or whatever it is. So we're probably more instinctive on that than we've ever been, and more wanting to research that than we've ever been, you know, whether that comes from food or whatever it is. Like every part of your life you will make those decisions now, and wrestling's just another part of that. Right. But yeah, I question myself all the time on that. God, I'm making this too much about me. It's not the point, but I think the only way you can do this is to discuss it from a personal perspective, because it is a personal thing. Like, it's personal judgment, right? You're putting your own personal judgment on a situation, and a situation where we don't know all the details. You know, we don't know what we're saying. You know, we don't know any of that stuff. So I think it's really hard to pass judgment on somebody, other than, yeah, this will damage your brand. You knew it would damage your brand. You continue that relationship. Has there been enough kind of respect for the victim? We don't know. We just don't know. But those kind of moral choices and making them decisions about how you watch wrestling, how you consume it, you know, who you support, they're individual ones. And that's kind of my key thing from that. You know, but don't live in a reality where you think everything's black and white and wrestling's fucking perfect now. Please don't. Because you only end up disappointed. That sounds a really awful thing to end on, but it's true.
It's true.
Yeah, it's hard. But for me, it's like, I look back now and I think, why do we still do this? Why do we do that? And it's like, because we can have a voice. And it sounds really kind of, what's the word? It sounds really obnoxious in some ways to say that we can help be a voice of change, but we can.
Yes.
And the more people that put that pressure on in either which way, the better. But that's the only way we can do it. There's no point just sitting on the sidelines anymore and just saying, you know, this is acceptable, this is what's always happened. If people make themselves accountable, hold them accountable. But also, you know, we don't need to destroy people in that sense. It's just like, we have to hold people accountable, but most importantly, we have, you know, the only way to change the culture is to continue to talk about it. And I think with this subject in particular, because it's so difficult, you've seen so many people shy away from it because, you know, the old wrestling talking heads aren't going to want to get involved in it because they've said, you know, they've been too involved in it anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have to discuss these things, and it's difficult, and not everyone will agree with us, and it'll create kind of extreme reactions, and that's fine. But the only way that we change things is by talking about it.
Yep.
Yeah, right. I don't think it's exhausting, isn't it? No, it's just exhausting. For me, it's like, I just look back on all these years and I question myself. It's so stupid because it's like, yeah. All right, let's move on because I'm done.
All right. So, yes, this has been. Well, I guess I'll do the outro, Trish.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. This has been the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. As we talked about at the top of the show, you can find us at the Social Suplex Podcast Network. We have a lot of awesome fellow podcastians over there that you can listen to, including the newest joining to the network, which is Joshing Around with Tim and Eric. And then we also have Tunnel Talk back after their hiatus.
Thank God.
Allie has finally returned from the wars. We're very pleased that her car has been repaired and she has returned, which was wonderful to hear her on Sunday. She was missed.
Made the Carolinas sound like it's like something in The Handmaid's Tale. Territories.
Yeah. We also have One Nation Radio, All Things Elite, Keeping It Strong Style, IMP's AEW Adventure, the AEW Match Guide, and Wrestling Art with Chris Things. So please feel free to check out any of the programs on the Social Suplex Network. There's also the Social Suplex newsletter that we talked about at the top of the show, which will be available at socialsuplex.com. I think you have a new issue coming out shortly.
Yep.
And Trish and I are available at Blue Sky or Twitter. We're not calling it X. Underneath our names and at Trish and Sarah at Twitter and maybe under our own names at Blue Sky. And you can also email us at trishandsarahpod@gmail.com if you have any questions or anything you want us to discuss. We will be back in 2 weeks, which will be the last weekend in February. I'm not sure what else we've got. Oh, yes, and we are produced. Could you imagine if I missed that? We are produced by the inestimable Leah of Tunnel Talk. Who,
I like aero Leah in the air then. That was kind of fun.
I know she did, which is good. Leah puts up with so much of us, so much from us, and does so much for us, and we are always grateful to her for everything. And you should be listening to Tunnel Talk because it is a really good wrestling show. And
she's going to kill us for going over time as well, but
well,
it is what it is.
Us. I'm teasing. I gotta. So yeah, you should listen to all these programs. You should go off and do things. You should think carefully about wrestling. You should engage thoughtfully with everything in your world. You should say fuck ice if you're at a wrestling show. Trish.
Yep.
I've been thinking about the fact that Netflix has Bridgerton, a new season coming out, and I was wondering what the Raw Bridgerton crossover event would look like because they had the Stranger Things crossover event.
They'll get the Wyatt Six to do it.
I just think it would be amazing.
Evil really could do it, but Evil could do it.
Evil could do
it.
Could do it.
Evil's debut should be in the Bridgerton crossover. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he would be a very good villain.
He could have an oracle. I reckon he could have an oracle.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay.
It's been a good show. It's been wonderful. We appreciate all of you.
Yep.
Have a lovely week.
Back to the Winter Olympics.
Back to the Winter Olympics, and we'll be back in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.